Welcome to FW. Let us get started. The stepson's ledger. The knife went in at 11:47 p.m. I remember the exact time because the clock on the wall, the one my father bought when he still loved my mother, before the cancer took her, before he brought them home, that clock was the last thing I saw before the world went red. Tick tock, then steel, then nothing. My stepbrother Marcus was drunk, not the funny kind of drunk, the cruel kind. The kind that made him remember every time I scored higher on a test, every time our father praised my work ethic, every time the old man looked at me, his real son, with something like pride. Marcus couldn't stand it. He was the golden boy, the one with the expensive tutors, the private school, the car at 16. I was the servant, the one who cooked, cleaned, ironed his shirts, stayed up until 2 a.m. finishing his homework assignments because Marcus has a social life, Ethan. You're just useful, that's what my stepmother called me. Useful like a tool, like a sponge. And at 11:47 p.m. on the night of my 26th birthday, a birthday no one remembered, not even me until I saw the date on my phone while mopping the kitchen floor, Marcus decided he'd had enough of my usefulness. He came home from the club. I was on my knees scrubbing wine stains from the marble tiles he'd tracked in. He stood over me. I didn't look up. I never looked up, that was the rule. When Marcus entered a room, you kept your eyes down, you kept your voice soft, you kept your existence small. You know what Dad said today? His voice slurred, but the malice was sharp, crystal clear. He said, "You're better than me, at everything. Can you believe that?" My own father said the servant boy is better than his real son. I kept scrubbing. The sponge made a sound like wet flesh against stone. I should have run, I know that now. I should have gotten up, walked out the door, kept walking until the city ended and the fields began. But I didn't, because I was useful. Because useful things don't run. They stay, they endure. They hope that someday, somehow, the people who use them will look down and see a human being. "Look at me," Marcus said. I didn't. He kicked the bucket. Dirty water splashed across my face, my chest, the floor I'd been cleaning for 3 hours. I was soaked, freezing. Tired in a way that sleep doesn't fix. "Not even worth the water," he whispered. Then the knife, not a kitchen knife, something fancier, something he'd probably bought to impress someone at the club. It caught the light from the chandelier I'd polished that morning on my knees with a toothbrush because my stepmother said the regular cloth left streaks. The first cut was across my shoulder. I felt it more than I saw it, a cold line, then heat, then wet. I opened my mouth to scream, but Marcus clamped his hand over my face. He smelled like whiskey and expensive cologne and the particular rot of someone who has never been told no. "SHH," he said. "You'll wake mother." Mother, not his mother, not my mother. Mother, the woman who'd married my father 6 months after my real mother died. The woman who'd looked at me 8 years old, grieving, confused, and said, "You'll earn your keep, Ethan. We don't keep pets in this house." I tried to fight, I really did, but I was tired. I was so tired. 10 years of scrubbing, cooking, apologizing, disappearing. My body had nothing left, my spirit had nothing left. When Marcus raised the knife again, I didn't even raise my arms to block it. I just thought, I hope I don't make a mess. She'll make me clean it up. Even dead, I'll be useful. The second cut went deeper. The clock ticked, the world went red. Then black. I woke up screaming. That's the first thing I remember. The screaming, my own voice, raw, tearing out of my throat like something alive and desperate. I was sitting up in bed, hands clutching my chest, heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I was breathing. I was breathing. The air tasted like dust and old wood and the particular smell of the guest room, the room they'd given me when I turned 16, the room with the broken heater and the window that didn't close properly, the room directly above the garage where I could hear Marcus's sports car purring at 2 a.m. when he brought girls home. I knew this room. I hated this room, but I was alive. I looked down at my hands. Small, smooth, no calluses from 10 years of scrubbing floors. No scar across my palm from the time I burned myself cooking Marcus's birthday dinner and my stepmother told me to finish the sauce first, then deal with it. I threw off the blanket and ran to the mirror. The face staring back at me was 16 years old. 16, I touched my cheek. The skin was soft, unlined. The dark circles under my eyes, permanent fixtures by age 20, were gone. My hair was longer, shaggier, the way I wore it before I learned to keep it short and neat because long hair makes you look lazy, Ethan. I was 16. I was 16. I stood there for I don't know how long, minutes, hours, maybe days in that strange stretched time of shock, just staring at the boy in the mirror. The boy who didn't know yet. The boy who still thought, somewhere deep down, that if he just worked hard enough, smiled politely enough, became invisible enough, they would eventually love him. Or at least stop hurting him. I wanted to warn him. I wanted to grab his shoulders and shake him and scream, "Run, run now, don't wait, don't hope, they will never love you. They will use you until you're empty and then they will throw you away like a broken tool." Run, but I couldn't because I was him. And because as the shock faded and something colder, harder, sharper took its place, I realized, I remembered everything, every conversation, every cruelty. Every moment of my stepmother's fake smile, Marcus's casual violence, my father's slow withdrawal into work and whiskey until he stopped seeing me at all. I remembered the will, the one my stepmother convinced him to change when I was 18, the one that left everything to Marcus and her. I remembered the college acceptance letter I'd hidden under my mattress because showing it would mean thinking you're better than your brother Ethan. How selfish. I remembered the knife. I remembered the clock. Tick, tock. 11:47 p.m. I remembered dying. And now, standing in this freezing room with my 16-year-old face and my 26-year-old memories, I felt something I hadn't felt in 10 years. Not fear, not hope, rage, but not the hot kind. Not Marcus's drunk, sloppy rage. This was cold, calculated, patient, the kind of rage that plans, the kind that waits. The kind that opens a small leather notebook, the one I'd bought with birthday money from my mother's sister, the only person who remembered I existed, and begins to write. I found the notebook under my mattress, right where I'd left it. The pages were blank except for the first line, written in my 16-year-old handwriting, shaky and hopeful. Today I start my journal. Maybe someday someone will read this and know I was here. I tore out that page. And I wrote a new first line in the handwriting of a man who had died and been reborn. The ledger of debts, every cruelty, every lie, every drop of blood, I remember all of it, and I will make them pay. Not with violence, with justice, with patience, with the one thing they never expected from the servant boy. I paused, then I added, intelligence. The door opened without a knock. It never did. Privacy was a privilege, and privileges were for family. I was not family, I was useful. My stepmother stood in the doorway, already dressed in her silk robe, her blonde hair perfectly styled even at 6:30 a.m. She was 43, beautiful in the way of expensive maintenance and cold eyes. She looked at me, at my rumpled clothes, my pale face, my hands still shaking from the memory of death, and she smiled, not a warm smile. The other kind, the kind that didn't reach her eyes, the kind that calculated and assessed and found me lacking. Ethan, she said, you're awake early. Good, Marcus has a chemistry test today. You'll need to make his breakfast, eggs Benedict, the way he likes. And don't forget the hollandaise sauce. You ruined it last time. He was very disappointed. She said it like I was a disappointing appliance. A blender that didn't blend properly. A vacuum that missed spots. I looked at her. I looked at the woman who in 10 years would convince my father to change his will. The woman who would watch Marcus kick me, cut me, kill me, and call it boys being boys. The woman who would inherit my father's company, his house, his life, while my body was buried in an unmarked grave because we don't want scandal. Ethan, even in death you should be useful. Looked at her, and I smiled, the same smile, the one that didn't reach my eyes, the one that calculated and assessed and found her lacking. Of course, mother, I said. I'll make it perfect. Marcus deserves the best. The word mother tasted like poison, like broken glass, like the blood that had filled my mouth at 11:47 p.m. on a night that hadn't happened yet, but I said it perfectly. Sweetly, obediently, she didn't notice the difference. Why would she? I was useful. I was predictable. I was the servant boy who knew his place. She turned and walked away, her silk robe whispering against the doorframe. I waited until her footsteps faded down the stairs, then I opened my notebook and wrote, Entry 1, Stepmother, the hollandaise sauce. August 14, 2016. She will use this moment, this failure, to remind father that I am ungrateful and careless. She will suggest that Marcus needs a tutor. The tutor will cost 400 hour. The tutor will be her lover's son. This is the beginning of the embezzlement. I know this because I found the receipts in 2021, in the locked drawer she thought I didn't know about. I know the combination. 12/26/09, her birthday, she's that predictable. I closed the notebook. I looked at the mirror one more time. The boy looked back at me, 16, scared, exhausted, but with something new in his eyes. Something that hadn't been there before, patience. I had 10 years to watch them, to learn them. To become the perfect, obedient, invisible servant they expected. And then piece by piece to take everything, not with a knife. Not with Marcus's sloppy, drunken violence, with the ledger, with memory, with the terrible, beautiful, patient intelligence of a man who had already died once, and had nothing left to lose. I made the eggs Benedict perfectly. The hollandaise was smooth as silk, golden as sunlight, rich as the life I should have had. Marcus ate it without looking at me. My stepmother praised his appetite for success. My father, already thinning, already drinking, already disappearing, grunted approval and left for work without meeting my eyes. I watched them all, I smiled, and I wrote in my notebook under the table where no one could see, the game begins, and they don't even know they're playing. Chemistry test was on a Tuesday. I knew this because I'd already lived through it once. The first time at 16, trembling at my desk while Marcus copied answers from my paper, and my stepmother smiled from the doorway like she'd orchestrated the whole thing. Because she had. She'd bribed the proctor. She'd threatened my teacher. She'd made sure her golden boy would pass no matter how little he knew, while I would sit there, silent and invisible, my perfect score attributed to cheating, because the servant boy couldn't possibly be smarter than his brother. That was the first time, this was the second. And this time I was the one who'd orchestrated everything. Marcus stumbled into the kitchen at 7:15 a.m., exactly 17 minutes later than usual. His eyes were red-rimmed, his skin pale and clammy, his expensive silk pajama shirt stained with something that looked like wine but smelled like vomit. He'd been out until 3 a.m., I knew because I'd heard his car, heard him cursing at the gate, heard my stepmother's whispered scolding through the walls. The same conversation, word for word, that I'd heard 10 years ago. Keep your voice down, the servants. Ethan's not a servant, Mother, he's furniture. Even furniture has ears, Marcus. Be careful. I'd lain in my freezing bed, eyes open, notebook pressed against my chest, and I'd written it down. Every word, every inflection. Every drop of contempt that pooled on the floor like spilled wine. Now, watching Marcus grip the counter for balance, I felt that cold thing in my chest again. Not rage. Rage was too hot, too messy, too Marcus. This was something else, something that watched, something that waited. Something that had already buried them in a grave of their own making, and was simply waiting for them to fall in. Late, my stepmother said, not looking up from her tablet. She was reviewing stock portfolios, or pretending to. In 6 years, I would learn that most of her financial acumen was actually my father's accountant doing the work while she took credit. But that morning, at 7:15 a.m. on the first Tuesday of September, she was still the image of perfect motherhood. Concerned but not hovering, present but not intrusive, the kind of mother who made other mothers feel inadequate. Feeling sick, Marcus groaned, pressing his forehead against the marble counter. The same counter I'd scrubbed at midnight. The same counter where in another life I'd died. Feel better after breakfast, she said, still not looking up. Ethan made your favorite, the eggs, the way you like them. She said it like she'd cooked them herself. Like she'd stood at the stove for 40 minutes, whisking butter into egg yolks, adjusting the heat, watching the sauce thicken to exactly the right consistency. She'd never cooked a meal in her life, but in her mind, in the story she told herself and the world, she was the architect of every perfect moment in this house. I was the invisible hand, the ghost in the kitchen. I was fine with that, because ghosts see everything. Ghosts remember everything. And ghosts, when they come back with a ledger, are the most dangerous things in the world. Here, Marcus, I said, setting the plate in front of him. Perfect eggs Benedict, perfect hollandaise, perfect presentation, the kind that would have earned me a scholarship to culinary school if I'd been allowed to apply, if my father had signed the forms, if my stepmother hadn't burned them and told me cooking is for servants. Ethan, you're already good enough at that. Marcus didn't look at the plate. He didn't look at me, he never did. I was a function, a process, a thing that produced food and disappeared. But my stepmother looked. She looked because she noticed. She always noticed. Not the good things, never the good things, but the anomalies, the deviations. The moments when the servant boy stepped out of his assigned role, and I had stepped out just slightly, just enough. The eggs were too perfect, the hollandaise too smooth. Plate arranged too carefully, with a sprig of parsley that I knew was her favorite garnish, the one she always requested at restaurants but never admitted to liking because it was common. She noticed, her eyes narrowed just slightly. The tablet lowered just an inch. Ethan, she said, and her voice was different now. Not the usual dismissive tone, something sharper, something that probed. You've been attentive lately. Is there something you need? It was a test. I recognized it immediately. She'd used it before in the first life when I was 13, and she'd caught me reading a book on contract law in the library. Is there something you need, Ethan? Like I was a stray dog scratching at the door. Like needing something was a weakness she could exploit. Last time I'd stammered. I'd apologized. I'd hidden the book and never touched it again. This time I smiled. The same smile she'd used on me. The one that didn't reach my eyes. The one that said, I see you, I understand you, and I am not afraid of you. Nothing, Mother, I said, keeping my voice soft, my eyes downcast, my posture slightly hunched, the perfect picture of servitude. I just want Marcus to do well on his test. He's been working so hard. The lie was beautiful. It was poetry. It was a knife wrapped in silk. Marcus hadn't worked hard. He'd never worked hard. He'd been handed everything, grades, opportunities, forgiveness, and he'd squandered all of it because he'd never learned that things have value. To him, the world was a vending machine that dispensed whatever he wanted, whenever he wanted, and someone else always paid. My stepmother studied me for a long moment. I could see her calculating, assessing, trying to find the angle, because there was always an angle. In her world, no one did anything without wanting something in return. Kindness was currency. Attention was debt. Every interaction was a transaction. She couldn't see my angle, because my angle was 10 years deep, because my angle was written in blood in a notebook under my mattress, because my angle was revenge, and revenge was the one currency she didn't understand. That's sweet, she said finally, and the word tasted like poison. Marcus, eat your breakfast. Your tutor arrives at 9. Tutor, I kept my face blank, my hands steady. But inside, something cold and satisfied uncoiled. The tutor, his name was Julian Vance. I knew this because I'd found his name on receipts in 2021, in the locked drawer with the combination 122609. I'd found his father's name too, Reginald Vance, financial advisor, convicted of embezzlement in 2022, sentenced to 8 years in prison. The man who'd helped my stepmother siphon nearly $2 million from my father's company before anyone noticed. Julian was 22, handsome in a soft, forgettable way, expensive glasses, cheap shoes. The particular arrogance of someone who'd been told he was smart without ever being challenged. He'd graduated from a mediocre university with mediocre grades, but his father had connections, and my stepmother had needs, and so Julian Vance became Marcus's chemistry tutor at $400 per hour. In the first life, I'd hated him. He'd looked at me the same way everyone did, like furniture, like a servant, like a thing. He'd eaten my food, used my bathroom, tracked mud on my floors, and never once said thank you. He'd helped Marcus cheat on tests, write college essays, apply for internships he didn't deserve. He was part of the machine, the system, the great grinding wheel that crushed people like me into dust. In this life, I was going to use him. Julian arrived at 8:47 a.m., 13 minutes early, because he was eager, because he needed this job, because his father's connections were already fraying and the Vance family was one scandal away from ruin. I knew this because I'd read the news. In 2022, while I was dying, I opened the door before he could knock. "Mr. Vance," I said, keeping my voice neutral, my eyes appropriately downcast. "Marcus is in the study." "I'll bring coffee." He barely looked at me. A nod, a murmur, the same dismissal I'd received 10,000 times, but as he passed I noticed something, a detail, a crack in the armor. His left hand was shaking, not much, just slightly. The tremor of someone who hadn't slept, who was drinking too much coffee, who was scared of something. I filed it away. In the ledger, in the endless, patient memory of a man who had died and been reborn, entry 2, Julian Vance, shaking left hand. August 14, 2016. Possible pressure from father, gambling, drugs. Will investigate. The study was my father's domain, or had been before he started spending 16 hours a day at the office, before he started drinking in his car, before he stopped seeing his family and started seeing his memories. It smelled of leather and old paper and the particular dust of neglect. Marcus sat at the desk, head in his hands, looking like he wanted to die. Julian sat across from him, opening his briefcase, laying out textbooks with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd done this many times before. I brought the coffee. Black for Julian, because I'd noticed last time, 10 years ago, the first time, that he never added cream or sugar. Marcus didn't drink coffee. Marcus drank energy drinks and vodka, sometimes together. "Thanks," Julian said, not looking at me. I set the tray down. I turned to leave. And then, because I was a ghost, because I was invisible, because no one ever noticed the servant boy, I paused, just for a moment, just long enough to see the papers Julian had laid out on the desk, the test, Marcus's chemistry test, the one scheduled for 2 p.m. that afternoon, the one that would determine his grade, his GPA, his college prospects, his entire future. And there in Julian's neat, precise handwriting were the answers, not all of them, just enough, the difficult ones. The ones that would raise suspicion if Marcus got them all right. The carefully calibrated cheat sheet, designed to make him look smart but not too smart, smart enough to pass, not smart enough to stand out. I memorized them, every answer, every formula, every carefully constructed lie. Then I left in my room. I opened the notebook. Entry 3, the test. Julian has the answers. He will give Marcus approximately 60% of the correct answers, enough to pass, not enough to excel. This is their system. This is how Marcus maintains his good student image without threatening the genius narrative they've built around him. The test is at 2 p.m. I have 4 hours. I paused, then I wrote, "I will make sure Marcus gets 100%, every answer correct, perfect score, and I will make sure everyone knows he cheated." Plan was simple, elegant, invisible. I didn't need to change the test. I didn't need to bribe the teacher. I didn't need to do anything that could be traced back to me. I just needed to make sure Marcus believed he was cheating successfully, and then I needed to make sure the teacher knew the teacher's name was Mrs. Patterson. Alina Patterson, 53 years old, widowed, 2 children in college. She drove a 15-year-old Honda and lived in an apartment complex that my stepmother would have described as squalid. She'd been teaching chemistry for 27 years. She was tough, fair, and deeply suspicious of rich kids who suddenly started acing tests. In the first life, she'd accused Marcus of cheating. My stepmother had destroyed her, called the school board, threatened her job, made her life so miserable that she'd retired early, moved to a different state, and never taught again. I'd felt guilty about that, for years. I'd told myself that Mrs. Patterson was just doing her job, that she'd been right, that my stepmother was the monster, not me. I was wrong. Mrs. Patterson wasn't just doing her job. She was one of the few people in my entire life who'd looked at me and seen something human. Once in the hallway, she'd stopped me. She'd said, "Ethan, you're smarter than your brother. Don't let them convince you otherwise." I'd stared at her, terrified, and run away. I'd never spoken to her again. She was the first person who'd ever told me I had value, and my stepmother had destroyed her for it. This time I was going to save her. And I was going to use her to destroy Marcus. At 10:30 a.m. I was in the school library. Not my school, Marcus's school, the private academy that cost $40,000 per year, the one I'd never been allowed to attend because public school is good enough for you, Ethan. We need to save money for Marcus's future. Walked in like I belonged there, because I did. I was 16. I looked like a student. No one questioned me. I found the library computer. I logged into the school's internal system. The password was Panthers2022, unchanged for 4 years, something I'd discovered in 2020 when Marcus had left his laptop open and I'd copied everything. Just in case. Just because I was invisible and invisible people see things, I didn't change anything. I didn't hack anything. I just looked. The test was there, in the chemistry folder. Password protected, but the password was ChemRocks1, something Mrs. Patterson had written on a sticky note on her desk, visible to anyone who walked by. I'd seen it, in another life, At another time, I opened the test, I read every question. And then, because I was a ghost, because I was patient, because I had died and been reborn with a ledger of debts, I wrote a letter, dear Mrs. Patterson. I am writing to inform you of a matter of academic dishonesty that will occur today at 2 p.m. in your chemistry class. Marcus Whitfield will be in possession of the complete answers to your test. He will attempt to score 100%. I know this because I have seen the answers. They are currently in the possession of his tutor, Julian Vance, who will provide them to Marcus during your class. The answers are written on a sheet of paper that will be hidden in Marcus's left shoe. I am not asking you to confront him. I am not asking you to accuse him without evidence. I am simply asking you to watch, to observe, to be the excellent teacher you have always been. If I am wrong, I will never contact you again. If I am right, I hope you will remember that some of us see you, some of us value you, some of us will not let the world destroy you for doing what is right. A student who remembers. I printed the letter at the library. I put it in an envelope. I wrote Mrs. Patterson, private, on the front. And then, because I was still a servant, still invisible, still bound by the rules of a game I was only beginning to learn, I slipped it into her mailbox during lunch when the teacher's lounge was empty and the hallway cameras were conveniently angled away. I didn't sign it. I didn't need to. Ghosts don't sign their work at 1:45 p.m. I was in the parking lot of Marcus's school. Not inside. I didn't have a pass, didn't have a reason, didn't have any right to be there. I was there because I needed to see, because I needed to know, because some part of me, the part that had died at 11:47 p.m. with a knife in my chest and a clock on the wall, needed to watch the first domino fall. Marcus walked into the building at 1:52 p.m. He was walking better now, steadier, the hangover burned off by adrenaline and fear. Julian walked beside him, carrying his briefcase, wearing his expensive glasses, his left hand still shaking slightly. They disappeared inside. I waited. At 2:47 p.m., 47 minutes into a test that should have taken 90, Marcus emerged. His face was flushed. His eyes were bright. He was grinning, the same grin he'd worn when he'd kicked the bucket of dirty water into my face, the same grin that said, I won, I always win, the world gives me everything I want. Julian walked beside him, nodding, smiling. Shaking that trembling left hand, they got into Julian's car. They drove away. I stayed in the parking lot. I waited. At 3:15 p.m., Mrs. Patterson emerged. She was walking slowly, like someone in shock, like someone who'd seen a ghost. In her hand she held a piece of paper, the letter, or perhaps something else. She looked around the parking lot. She looked at the trees, the sky, the empty spaces where students had been. She didn't see me. I was invisible. I was a ghost. But she smiled. It was a small smile. A tired smile. The smile of someone who'd been fighting alone for a very long time and had just discovered she wasn't alone anymore. She got into her Honda. She drove away. I opened my notebook. Entry 4, the test. Marcus scored 100%, every answer correct. Mrs. Patterson knows. The letter worked. Phase 1 complete. I paused, then I wrote. Phase 2 begins tomorrow, because a perfect score is suspicious. Because a perfect score from a failing student is undeniable. Because my stepmother will try to destroy Mrs. Patterson, just like she did before. And this time I will be ready. This time I have evidence. This time I have the ledger. I closed the book. I looked at the school building, the place I'd never been allowed to enter, the place where my brother learned to be cruel and my father learned to be absent and my stepmother learned to be a monster. I smiled. And I whispered to the empty parking lot, to the ghosts of my first life, to the boy who died at 11:47 p.m. with a knife in his chest and a clock on the wall. Tick-tock, mother, tick-tock. Emergency board meeting was called for 9:00 a.m. on a Thursday. I knew this because I'd heard my stepmother's phone call at 6:30 a.m., her voice sharp as broken glass, slicing through the quiet house like a knife through silk. She'd been awake since 5:00, packing in her study, making calls, arranging pieces on a board she thought she controlled. She'd called 3 lawyers, 2 private investigators, 1 journalist from the local paper who owed her a favor from the charity gala where she'd accidentally let him see her cleavage while signing a 10,000 check. She was building a wall, a fortress, a narrative. And at the center of that narrative was the lie. Mrs. Patterson is a jealous, incompetent teacher who targeted my son because of his family's wealth. She fabricated evidence. She harassed him. She should be fired, blacklisted, destroyed. It was the same lie she'd told before, in my first life. The one where I died. This time I was going to help her build it. And then I was going to tear it down brick by brick. I made breakfast at 7:15 a.m. Perfect eggs, perfect toast. Perfect coffee, black and bitter, the way my father used to drink it before he stopped tasting anything. I arranged everything on the tray with the precision of a surgeon, the care of a priest preparing communion, the patience of a man who had already died and was simply waiting for the world to catch up. My stepmother entered the kitchen at 7:42 a.m. She was wearing her power suit, charcoal grey, tailored to her exact measurements, the kind of suit that cost more than Mrs. Patterson's annual salary. Her hair was pulled back so tight it stretched her face into a mask of perfect composure. Her makeup was flawless, her eyes were murder. Ethan, she said, and her voice was different now. Not the usual dismissive tone, not the probing suspicion from yesterday, something colder, something that used. "Mother," I said, keeping my eyes down, my voice soft, my hands steady on the coffee pot. "I heard you on the phone. Is everything all right? It was a risk, a small one. Servant boys don't ask questions. They don't express concern. They don't notice things, but I was 16. I was supposed to be naive, supposed to be eager. Supposed to be desperate for any crumb of maternal attention, any hint that I belonged in this family, any sign that my years of service had earned me something more than contempt." She looked at me. Really looked. For the first time in years, perhaps ever, she saw me not as furniture but as a tool that could be used. "Marcus is in trouble," she said, and her voice cracked just slightly, the perfect performance of a concerned mother, the kind of crack that would play beautifully in a courtroom, in a newspaper article, in the minds of jurors who wanted to believe that wealthy women could love their children too. "A teacher is accusing him of cheating. It's not true, of course. Marcus would never, but this woman, this Patterson, she has a history. Resentment, she targets successful students." She was testing the narrative, rehearsing it, using me as a mirror, a sounding board, a practice audience for the performance she would give in 3 hours. I let her see what she wanted to see. My eyes widened, my mouth opened slightly. My hands trembled just enough, just the right amount of shocked innocence. "Marcus," I whispered. "But he's always so careful. He would never cheat. He doesn't need to. He's brilliant." The lie was exquisite. It was a sonnet. It was a symphony of false sincerity, and she bought it completely, because it was exactly what she wanted to hear. Because it confirmed her worldview that Marcus was perfect, that his success was real, that anyone who questioned it was motivated by envy. "Exactly," she said, and her voice hardened. "Exactly, but we need to protect him. We need to make sure the truth comes out, the real truth." She was telling me her plan, not because she trusted me. Because I was invisible, because I was furniture. Because furniture doesn't remember, doesn't judge, doesn't betray. She was wrong. "Mother," I said, and I let my voice crack, let my eyes fill with tears, real tears, because I was thinking of Mrs. Patterson, of her Honda, of her small smile in the parking lot, of the way she'd been destroyed in my first life for doing what was right. "Is there anything I can do? I know I'm not important, but I want to help. I want to help Marcus." It was the perfect offer, the perfect trap, the perfect piece of bait dangled in front of a woman who had never met sincerity she couldn't exploit. She looked at me for a long moment, calculating, assessing, finding the angle, and then she smiled. "Actually, Ethan," she said, and her voice was honey now, warm and sweet and deadly. "There is something you can do. The school board meeting is at 9. I need someone to sit in the audience, someone, unobtrusive, someone who can listen. Who can watch, who can tell me what Mrs. Patterson says, what her body language reveals, what weaknesses we can exploit." She paused. "Can you do that? Can you be my eyes and ears?" She was offering me a gift, the gift of inclusion, the gift of purpose, the gift of being useful in a new way, a way that made me feel important, needed, almost like family. In my first life, I would have wept with gratitude. I would have promised her anything. I would have sold my soul for that smile. In this life, I smiled back. "Of course, Mother," I said. "I'll do anything for this family, anything, including burning it to the ground." The school boardroom smelled of old wood and older politics. The chairs were leather, cracked with age, the kind of chairs that had supported the weight of 1,000 decisions, 1,000 compromises, 1,000 quiet betrayals. The walls were lined with portraits of former board members, stern men in stern suits, their painted eyes following every movement with the judgment of the dead. I sat in the back row, the last seat, the one closest to the door, the one in the shadows, the one where no one looked because no one expected anyone to be there. I was invisible. I was furniture. I was a ghost, and I had my notebook. Mrs. Patterson sat at the center table. She was wearing her best dress, navy blue modest, the kind of dress that said, "I am professional, I am respectable, I have nothing to hide." Her hands were folded in her lap, her back was straight. Her eyes were tired but clear. She looked like a woman who had already decided to die on this hill. My stepmother sat across from her, flanked by lawyers, supported by my father, who had actually come, who had left his office, who had put down his whiskey long enough to attend, which meant he was either very concerned or very drunk. Probably both. Marcus sat beside him. Perfect posture, perfect suit. Perfect expression of wounded innocence, the kind of expression that had been practiced in front of mirrors, coached by lawyers, refined by a mother who understood that victimhood was the most powerful weapon in any wealthy arsenal. The board members filed in. 7 of them, local dignitaries, business owners, a doctor, a lawyer, a woman who ran the local animal shelter and had been appointed because no one else wanted the position. They looked nervous, they looked uncomfortable. They looked like people who knew they were about to be used as props in a play they hadn't written. The chairman, a man named Harold Vance, no relation to Julian, just one of those coincidences that life throws at you like a joke, called the meeting to order. "Mrs. Patterson," he said, and his voice was gentle, apologetic, already conceding. "You have made a serious accusation against Marcus Whitfield. Would you care to present your evidence?" Mrs. Patterson stood. She was small, smaller than I remembered. The kind of small that comes from years of making yourself compact, of folding yourself into corners, of becoming invisible in a world that didn't want to see you, but her voice was not small. Yesterday, she said, Marcus Whitfield took my chemistry examination. He scored 100%, every answer correct, perfect score. She paused. Marcus Whitfield has never scored above 62% in my class. He has missed 17 classes this semester. He has failed 3 quizzes. He has not turned in a single homework assignment. Room was silent. The board members shifted. My stepmother's smile tightened. And yet, Mrs. Patterson continued, he scored 100%, with answers that matched word for word the answer key that was stolen from my desk 3 days prior. A murmur, a rustle, my father's head came up, suddenly alert, suddenly present in a way he hadn't been in years. Stolen, the chairman asked. Stolen, Mrs. Patterson confirmed. I reported it to the principal. He did nothing. I reported it to the school security. They did nothing, so I changed the test. I rewrote every question. I created a new answer key, and I planted a false answer in the stolen key, a deliberate error, a formula that doesn't exist, a chemical compound that cannot be synthesized. She reached into her bag. She pulled out a paper. Marcus Whitfield wrote that false answer, the impossible compound. Formula that doesn't exist. She looked at Marcus, looked at him with something that was not anger, not hatred, but profound, exhausted disappointment. He didn't know it was false because he didn't study. He didn't learn, he simply copied. Room exploded. My stepmother stood. Her lawyers stood. My father stood, swaying slightly, his face pale, his eyes moving from Marcus to Mrs. Patterson to the paper in her hand like a man watching a car crash in slow motion. This is slander. My stepmother shouted, and her voice was perfect, controlled, the voice of a woman who had never been denied anything in her life. My son is a brilliant student. He has tutors. He studies for hours every night. This woman, this jealous, resentful woman, she has targeted him from the beginning. She hates our family. She hates our success. She was magnificent. She was terrifying. She was a force of nature, a hurricane of maternal fury, a performance so convincing that even I who knew the truth, who had died because of this truth, felt a moment of doubt. But Mrs. Patterson didn't flinch. Whitfield, she said, and her voice was quiet, but it cut through the shouting like a knife through silk. I have taught for 27 years. I have seen students cheat. I have seen parents lie. I have seen wealthy families destroy careers to protect their children's secrets. She paused, but I have never seen a mother look so proud of her son's dishonesty. Room went silent again, a different kind of silent, the kind that comes before a storm, before a breaking, before the moment when everything changes. My stepmother's face changed. The mask slipped, just for a second, just long enough to reveal the thing beneath, not love, not concern, but cold, calculating fury. The fury of a woman who had been challenged, who had been exposed, who had been caught in a lie by someone she considered beneath her. You will regret this, she whispered. Not shouted, whispered. The whisper was worse. The whisper was a promise. Mrs. Patterson smiled, the same small smile from the parking lot, the smile of someone who had already lost everything and therefore had nothing left to fear. Perhaps, she said, but I will not regret telling the truth. The board meeting ended in chaos. My stepmother's lawyers demanded an investigation of Mrs. Patterson, not Marcus. They accused her of harassment, of targeting wealthy students, of planting evidence. They produced character witnesses, private investigators' reports, psychological evaluations that claimed Mrs. Patterson was obsessed with wealth disparity and suffered from class resentment. It was a blizzard of paper, a storm of accusations, a masterclass in how wealthy people use the system to protect their own. But something had shifted. I saw it in the board members' faces. In the way they looked at Marcus, not with admiration but with suspicion. In the way they looked at my stepmother, not with deference but with discomfort. In the way the chairman kept glancing at Mrs. Patterson's paper, the one with the false formula, the impossible compound. The seed had been planted. It wouldn't sprout today, maybe not tomorrow, but it was in the ground and I had watered it, and I would wait because I was patient. Because I was a ghost. Because I had died at 11:47 p.m. and been reborn with a ledger and nothing but time after the meeting. I followed my family to the parking lot. My stepmother was on the phone, her voice sharp, issuing commands, arranging the next phase of the war. My father was in the car, head in his hands, either crying or sleeping or both. Marcus was leaning against the Mercedes, scrolling through his phone, his face a mask of perfect unconcern, the same face he'd worn when he kicked dirty water in my face, when he raised the knife, when he watched me die. I walked past him. Invisible, furniture, a ghost, but as I passed I dropped something, a small piece of paper, folded, sealed with a drop of wax, red, the color of blood, the color of warning. Marcus didn't notice. He was too busy texting, too busy being the golden boy. Too busy being untouchable, but Julian Vance noticed. Julian, who had been waiting by his car, who had been watching the meeting through the window, who had been shaking that trembling left hand. He saw the paper fall. He saw me walk away. He saw the red wax seal, and he picked it up. I didn't look back. I didn't need to, because I knew what was written on that paper. I'd written it at 3:00 a.m. by candlelight in my freezing room while the house slept and the clock ticked and the ghosts of my first life whispered encouragement. Julian, I know about the gambling. I know about Dmitri. I know your father is 3 months from bankruptcy and that the police are already investigating his financial advice. I also know that you helped Marcus cheat, that you have helped him cheat for 2 years. That you have accepted 400 per hour to commit academic fraud. You have a choice. Choice 1, continue protecting the Whitfields. Continue shaking. Continue waiting for the moment when your father's crimes become public and your life becomes ash. Choice 2, meet me tomorrow at 8:00 p.m. The coffee shop on Maple Street, the one with the broken neon sign. Come alone. Tell no one. I can help you, Julian. I can save your father. I can save you. But first you need to tell me everything about the Whitfields, every test, every bribe, every lie. The ledger is open, Julian, and your name is already written in it. A friend, I walked home. It was 3 miles. I could have taken the bus, could have called a car, could have asked my father for a ride, played the dutiful son, accepted the crumbs of attention that might fall from his distracted hand, but I walked because I needed to think, because I needed to plan. Because I needed to feel the pavement under my feet, the sun on my face, the wind in my hair, all the things I hadn't felt in my first life. All the things I'd lost when I became a servant, a ghost, a dead boy with a knife in his chest. At mile 2 I stopped at a payphone. The last one in the city, probably. A relic, a ghost like me. I dialed a number from memory. A number I'd found in 2021 in a drawer with a combination. 122609. The phone rang 3 times. Then, Dimitri's Auto Repair. How can I help you? The voice was gruff. Russian accent. The kind of voice that fixed cars during the day and collected debts at night. Dmitri, I said, and my voice was different now. Not the servant's voice, not the ghost's voice. Something colder, something older, something that had died and been reborn with a ledger of debts. I have a job for you, a collection. Julian Vance, gambling debt he owes. How much? A pause, rustling paper, the sound of a man checking his books. 8,000, Dmitri said, plus interest, plus fees, call it 12. Make it 15, I said, and add a deadline, 24 hours. Tell him a friend recommended he cooperate. A friend who knows about the Whitfield cheating scandal. A friend who can make his problems disappear, or multiply. Another pause, longer this time. The sound of a man reassessing, recalculating, recognizing that the voice on the other end of the line was not a victim. Not a mark, not someone to be trifled with. Who is this? Dmitri asked. I smiled. I could feel it on my face, cold and sharp and terrible. I'm the ledger, Dmitri, I said, and I'm open for business. I hung up. I walked the last mile home. And as I opened the door, as I slipped off my shoes, as I became invisible again, the servant boy, the furniture, the ghost, I heard my stepmother's voice from the study, sharp and furious and afraid. Find out who wrote that letter, she was saying. Find out who helped Patterson. Find out who is working against this family. I don't care what it costs. I don't care what you have to do. Find them and destroy them. I stood in the hallway, motionless, breathless, then I walked to my room. I opened my notebook. I wrote, Entry 5, the board meeting. Mrs. Patterson survives. The seed is planted. My stepmother suspects a traitor. She will look everywhere except where she should, at the servant boy, the furniture, the ghost who brings her coffee and smiles when she calls him useful. I paused, then I added, Julian will meet me tomorrow. Dmitri will call him tonight. And Marcus will begin to unravel, not because I will hurt him, because I will make him hurt himself. Because I will give him everything he wants and watch him destroy himself with greed. I closed the notebook. I lay on my bed. I stared at the ceiling. I listened to the clock tick, tick. Tock 11:47 p.m. In another life I died at this time. In this life I was alive. I was planning. I was patient. And I was only beginning. The coffee shop on Maple Street had a broken neon sign that flickered like a dying heartbeat. Open, open, casting red shadows across the cracked vinyl booths. And the counter where an old man wiped the same spot with the same rag, moving in circles like a ritual, like a prayer, like someone who had been waiting for something that never came. I arrived at 7:45 p.m., 15 minutes early. The habit of a servant, of someone who had learned that punctuality was the only virtue that couldn't be punished, the only obedience that might earn a crumb of tolerance. I sat in the last booth, the one in the corner, the one where the flickering sign cast the most shadows, where the surveillance camera had a blind spot, where no one looked because nothing ever happened. I ordered black coffee, the cheapest thing on the menu. I didn't drink it. I just needed to occupy space, to look like I belonged, to be invisible in the way that only people who have spent years being ignored truly understand. At 8:03 p.m., Julian Vance walked in. He looked worse than he had that morning. His expensive glasses were smudged, his cheap shoes were scuffed, his left hand shook so badly he had to grip the doorframe to steady himself. He was carrying a folder, thick, heavy, the kind of folder that held secrets, the kind that could destroy lives, the kind that men sold their souls to keep hidden or to expose. He saw me immediately, not because I was visible, because I was the only person in the coffee shop under 60, because I was the only one sitting alone. Because I was the only one who looked at him not with indifference but with recognition, the recognition of a predator who has finally cornered his prey, or a ghost who has finally found someone who can see him. He walked to my booth. He didn't sit. He stood there trembling, the folder clutched against his chest like a shield, like a prayer, like the last thing standing between him and the abyss. The boy, he said, not a question, a statement, a realization. The kind of realization that comes too late, after the trap has already closed, after the poison has already been swallowed, after the debt has already come due. Sit, Julian, I said, and my voice was different now, not the servant's voice, not the ghost's voice, something older, something colder, something that had died at 11:47 p.m. and learned that death was not an ending but an education. He sat, the vinyl creaked, the neon flickered. The old man behind the counter wiped his spot and pretended not to watch, which meant he was watching everything. I got the call, Julian said. His voice was a whisper, a confession, a last testament. Dimitri, he said 15,000. He said 24 hours. He said a friend recommended cooperation. He looked at me with eyes that were not just afraid but betrayed by a world that had promised him privilege and delivered only debt, betrayed by a father who had taught him to cheat and then left him to face the consequences alone. Who are you? How do you know these things? I smiled, the same smile my stepmother used, the one that didn't reach my eyes, the one that calculated and assessed and found the other person wanting. The boy you never noticed, Julian, I said. The one who brought your coffee, the one who cleaned your table, the one who watched you shake and knew exactly why. His face changed, the recognition finally coming, slow and terrible, like dawn breaking over a battlefield. Servant, he whispered. The Whitfield boy, the stepson. Ethan, I said. My name is Ethan. And yes, I am the stepson, the servant, the furniture. I leaned forward. The neon flickered red across my face, turning my 16-year-old features into something demonic, something ancient, something that had no right to exist in a coffee shop on Maple Street. But I'm also the man who died with a knife in his chest at 11:47 p.m., 10 years from now, because of the family you're helping, because of the lies you're telling, because of the system you're propping up with your 400 an hour fraud. I let that sit, I let him absorb it, the impossibility. The madness, the terrifying, liberating truth that the boy in front of him was not a boy at all but something else, something that remembered, something that had come back with a ledger and a purpose. Insane, Julian said, but his voice lacked conviction. Because insane people don't know the things I knew. Insane people don't predict the future with the precision of a prophecy. Insane people don't sit in coffee shops at 8:00 p.m., calmly waiting for their prey to deliver themselves. Perhaps, I said, but insane or not, I know about your father's bankruptcy. I know about Dimitri's debt. I know about the embezzlement investigation that will arrest Reginald Vance in 2022 and sentence him to 8 years in prison. I paused. And I know that you have a choice, Julian. A choice that no one else can give you. A choice that will determine whether you spend the next decade visiting your father in prison or watching him die a free man. His hands trembled. The folder trembled with them. The secrets inside shifting, whispering, begging to be released or buried forever. What choice? He asked. I reached across the table. I opened the folder. I didn't take it, not yet. I just opened it. I let him see that I wasn't afraid of what was inside, that I already knew, that I had always known. Give me everything, I said. Every receipt, every email, every recorded conversation, every test you helped Marcus cheat, every bribe you delivered. Every lie you told. I looked up at him, met his eyes, let him see the thing that lived behind my 16-year-old face, the patience, the rage, the terrible, beautiful certainty of a man who had already died and therefore had nothing left to fear. And in return, I will give you something no one else can. I will give you the name of the FBI agent who will arrest your father. I will give you the date of the raid. I will give you the evidence that will exonerate him, evidence that is currently hidden in a safety deposit box in Delaware, evidence that your father's business partner planted to frame him, evidence that no one else knows exists. I paused, and I will give you Dimitri's phone number, the real one, not the debt collection, the emergency line, the one he gives only to people who have paid him enough to earn his loyalty. Call it, tell him Ethan sent you, tell him the debt is cleared, tell him. Tell him the ledger is closed. Julian stared at me. He stared at me like I was a ghost, like I was a god, like I was the devil himself, offering a deal that was too good to be true, too terrible to refuse, too perfectly calibrated to his desperation to be anything but a trap. Why? He finally asked. Why help me? Why do any of this? I closed the folder. I slid it across the table. I took it in my hands, heavy, warm, alive with the weight of secrets, and I held it like a child, like a weapon, like the first real thing I had ever owned. Because, Julian, I said, you're not the enemy, you're a symptom, a tool, a cog in a machine that would have ground you to dust just like it ground me. I stood. The neon flickered red across my face, my chest, my hands holding the folder of secrets. The enemy is the machine, the family, the system that tells us some people are born to be used and others are born to use them. And I'm going to destroy that machine, piece by piece, lie by lie, debt by debt. I walked to the door. I stopped. I didn't look back. Called Dimitri, I said. Tonight, before midnight. And Julian, don't ever help Marcus cheat again. Not because I'll punish you, because I won't need to. In 6 months, Marcus Whitfield won't have a family. He won't have money. He won't have the power to hire tutors or bribe teachers or destroy lives. I paused. The door was cold against my palm. The night was waiting. He'll have nothing, just like I had nothing, just like you had nothing, and then we'll see what kind of man he is when the world stops giving him everything. I pushed through the door, the bell jangled, the neon flickered. And I was gone. I walked home through the dark streets, the folder clutched against my chest, my heart hammering against my ribs, my mind racing through the possibilities, the plans, the terrible, beautiful machinery of revenge. I had everything now, the receipts, the emails, the recorded conversations. Julian had been smarter than I thought, smarter than his father, smart enough to record every transaction, every bribe, every instruction from my stepmother. Insurance, he called it. Protection against the very family he was serving. He had been building his own ledger, his own record of debts, and now it was mine. I could expose them all tomorrow. I could walk into the school board, the newspaper, the police station, and I could lay out the evidence like a surgeon laying out instruments. I could destroy them in a day, in an hour, in the time it took for a headline to print, for a handcuff to click, for a reputation to burn, but I wouldn't, because destruction was too easy. Because exposure was too quick. Because my stepmother, my father, Marcus, they deserved something worse than justice. They deserved understanding. They deserved to know in their bones, in their blood, in the moment before they lost everything, exactly what they had done, exactly who they had used, exactly how much it cost. I was going to make them pay, not with prison, not with scandal, not with the quick, clean mercy of public exposure. I was going to make them pay with themselves, with their own greed. Their own arrogance, their own cruelty, turned inward like a knife, cutting the hand that held it. I was going to give them everything they wanted, and watch them destroy themselves with it. I reached my house at 9:47 p.m. The lights were on in my stepmother's study. The Mercedes was in the driveway. My father's car was gone, probably at the office, probably at a bar, probably somewhere that wasn't here, that wasn't home, that wasn't the place where his family was falling apart and he was too drunk to notice. I slipped through the side door, the servants' entrance. The door that creaked and stuck and no one ever fixed because servants don't complain, servants endure, servants are useful. I climbed the stairs to my room. My freezing room. My room above the garage where I could hear Marcus's sports car and the girls he brought home and the life he lived, while I scrubbed floors and cooked meals, and died at 11:47 p.m. with a knife in my chest. I locked the door, I sat on my bed, I opened the folder, and I began to read. The receipts were meticulous. Julian had recorded every payment, every date, every purpose. 2 years of academic fraud, documented with the precision of an accountant or a criminal or someone who had learned that evidence was the only currency that mattered in a world of lies. September 2014, 400, chemistry test. Marcus scored 78%. November 2014, 800. Midterm exams, 3 subjects. Marcus scored 82%, 85%, 79%. January 2015, 1,200. Final exams. 5 subjects. Marcus scored 84%, 81%, 86%, 80%, 83%. The pattern was clear. The grades were carefully calibrated, high enough to impress, not high enough to raise suspicion. The perfect fraud, the perfect lie. The perfect system that turned a mediocre, lazy, cruel boy into the image of academic excellence. And my stepmother had paid for all of it, not my father, her, from her personal account. The same account where she hid the embezzled money, the same account that would be discovered in 2021, the same account that would lead to her arrest and conviction and the destruction of everything she had built. I turned the page and found the emails from C. Whitfield at Whitfield Industries, com2. Marcus's progress. Julian, Marcus's chemistry teacher, is becoming suspicious. She asked him to explain a formula he supposedly mastered. He couldn't. You need to adjust your methods. Make sure he understands the basics, not just the answers. We can't afford another incident like the midterm. J. Vance tutoring at email com2. Ray, Marcus's progress, Mrs. Whitfield, I understand your concern, but Marcus refuses to study. He expects me to do the work for him. I've tried explaining concepts, but he interrupts, demands the answers, and threatens to have me fired if I don't comply. I'm not sure how much longer I can maintain this arrangement. See Whitfield at Whitfield Industries, com2. Ray, Marcus's progress. Julian, you're paid to handle problems, not create them. If Marcus wants answers, give him answers. If he wants to pass without studying, make it happen. That's what 400 an hour buys. And Julian, if you ever suggest that my son is lazy or difficult again, I'll make sure you never tutor in this city. I have that power, remember it. I read the exchange 3 times. Each time the cold thing in my chest grew colder. Each time the ledger in my mind grew heavier. Each time the image of my stepmother, her perfect suit, her perfect smile, her perfect maternal performance became more monstrous, more calculated, more deliberate. She knew she had always known. She didn't care about Marcus's education. She didn't care about his future. She cared about the image, the narrative. The story that the world told about the Whitfield family, perfect son, perfect mother, perfect life. And she was willing to destroy anyone who threatened that story. Teachers, tutors, servant boys who scored too high on tests. Anyone. I turned the page again and found the recordings. Julian had recorded 3 phone conversations. I didn't have a player, but I had the transcripts, typed, dated, annotated with the same obsessive precision as everything else. Recording 1 October 2015. Mrs. Whitfield, Julian, I need you to handle something. Marcus's English teacher, Mrs. Goldstein, she's asking questions about his college essay. She says it sounds professionally written. I need you to write another one, something worse, something that sounds like a teenager wrote it. Can you do that? Of course, Mrs. Whitfield, but the original essay was excellent. Marcus could get into a top school with, I don't care about top schools, Julian. I care about believability. I care about making sure no one looks too closely. Write a mediocre essay, something that gets him into a good school, not a great one. We want impressive, not suspicious. Do you understand? Yes, I understand. Good. And Julian, this conversation never happened. Recording 2 January 3, 2016. Marcus, hey tutor boy. Mom says you're complaining about me again, says you're not happy with my attitude. You know what my attitude is, Julian. My attitude is that I'm Marcus Whitfield, I'm rich, I'm important, and you're a nobody who gets paid to make me look smart. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to keep doing your job, and I'm going to keep treating you like the servant you are. And if you ever talk back to my mother again, I'll make sure you end up like Ethan. You know Ethan, the stepbrother. The one we keep around to clean toilets. That could be you, Julian, that will be you, remember it. Recording 3 March 22, 2016. Mrs. Whitfield, Julian, I have a new job for you. There's a boy at Marcus's school, Derek Chen. He's applying to the same colleges. His scores are inconvenient, higher than Marcus's. I need you to find something, a weakness, a scandal, anything that can be used. Mrs. Whitfield, I don't do that kind of. You do now. Or you find a new career, your choice. Pause, I'll see what I can find. And Julian, the stepbrother, Ethan, he's been asking questions about Marcus's grades, about the tutors, about things he shouldn't know. I need you to keep an eye on him. Report back. He's useful, but useful things can become dangerous if they start thinking. Watch him. No, Julian, you'll handle him. Make sure he knows his place. Make sure he remembers that he's not family. He's not even staff. He's, what did Marcus call him? Furniture. Yes, make sure the furniture stays quiet. I put the transcript down. My hands were shaking, not from fear, from rage. From the terrible, beautiful, patient rage that had been building since I woke up in my 16-year-old body, since I looked in the mirror and saw a boy who didn't know he was already dead, since I opened my notebook and wrote the first line of the ledger, furniture, that's what I was to them. That's what I had always been. That's what I would have remained, scrubbing and cooking and smiling and dying, if the knife hadn't ended my first life and given me this second chance. But I wasn't furniture anymore. I was the ledger. I was the ghost who remembered. I was the boy who died at 11:47 p.m. and woke up with a list of debts that would be paid in full, with interest, with the compounded cruelty of 10 years of servitude. I picked up the transcript again. I turned the page. And I found the photograph. It was small, wallet-sized, faded at the edges, creased down the middle, the kind of photograph that had been carried and hidden and wept over. The kind that survived by being invisible, by being unimportant, by being the last thing anyone would look for in a folder of fraud and corruption. It was a woman. She was standing in front of a house, not our house, not the Whitfield mansion, but a smaller house, a cottage really, with a garden and a porch and a cat sleeping on the railing. She was smiling, not the performative smile of my stepmother, not the cruel smile of Marcus, but a real smile, the kind that reached the eyes, the kind that made wrinkles, the kind that said, I am alive, I am here, I am happy. It was my mother, my real mother, the one who had died of cancer when I was 8. One whose funeral I wasn't allowed to attend because it's too upsetting for a child. Ethan, you'll stay home with the staff. The one whose photograph had been removed from the house, erased from the albums, turned into a ghost that only existed in my memory and my dreams. But here she was, alive, and the date on the back of the photograph, written in blue ink, in handwriting I recognized but had never seen before, was March 15, 2011, 3 years after her supposed death. 3 years after I was told she was gone forever. 3 years after my father married my stepmother and brought Marcus home and turned me from a son into a servant. I turned the photograph over, and I read the line on the back, the line that changed everything, the line that made the ledger not just a record of debts but a map to a mystery, a key to a door, a thread that led into a darkness I hadn't known existed. Ethan, they're lying about everything. Find me. I sat on my bed. The photograph in my hand, the folder open beside me, the clock ticking on the wall, not the same clock from my first life, not the one that had watched me die, but a different clock, a cheaper clock, the kind that servants had in their rooms, the kind that didn't matter enough to be noticed. Tick-tock, tick-tock, I looked at the photograph, I looked at my mother's face, I looked at the date, and I felt something crack inside me, not the cold rage, not the patient calculation, something else. Something that had been buried under 10 years of servitude, under the knife, under the death, under the rebirth. Hope, the hope that my mother was alive, the hope that she had escaped. The hope that she had been trying to find me, to save me, to tell me the truth about everything, the cancer, the marriage, the stepmother, the transformation of a family into a machine that consumed its own children. And the fear that she was dead after all. That the photograph was a fake, that the handwriting was a forgery. That M was not my mother but someone else, something else, another layer of the lie that I had been living since I was 8 years old. The cottage was exactly as I remembered from the photograph, small, weathered, with a porch that sagged slightly in the middle and a garden that had grown wild, untamed, beautiful in its refusal to be controlled. The cat was there too, an orange tabby with one torn ear, sleeping on the railing in the same patch of sunlight that had illuminated my mother's smile 5 years ago. I stood at the gate for 10 minutes before knocking, not because I was afraid, because I was preparing, because I was rehearsing. Because I was a 16-year-old boy with a 26-year-old's memories, standing in front of a door that might hold the answer to everything, and I needed to be ready for whatever was on the other side. The door opened before I could knock. She was not my mother. I knew this immediately. The height was wrong, the hair was wrong, the eyes were a different shade of brown, almost amber, like honey in sunlight rather than the deep chocolate I remembered. But she had my mother's sadness, my mother's strength. The particular way of holding herself, straight but not rigid, as if she had learned to carry weight without letting it break her. "Ethan," she said, not a question, a recognition, as if she had been waiting, as if she had known I would come. As if the photograph, the message, the entire chain of impossible clues had been designed specifically to lead me here, to this moment, to this door, to this woman who was not my mother but knew my name. "You know me," I said, not a question either. "I knew your mother," she said, and her voice was soft, worn, the voice of someone who had told this story before, who had practiced it in empty rooms, who had never expected to tell it to the person it mattered most to. "May I call you Ethan, or do you prefer something else? The Whitfields never used your name, did they? They called you boy. Servant, furniture." She paused. "Your mother hated that. She hated it more than she hated the cancer, more than she hated him. The fact that he erased you, that he made you invisible in your own life." She stepped aside. "Come in," she said. "I'll make tea, and I'll tell you what I know, what your mother wanted you to know, what she made me promise to keep until you came looking." I crossed the threshold. The cottage smelled of lavender and old books and something else, something I couldn't identify, something that made my chest ache with a memory I couldn't place. My mother's perfume perhaps, or the smell of her hair when she tucked me in at night, before the cancer, before the stepmother, before the transformation of a boy into a ghost. The woman, she never gave me her name, not then, not ever, led me to a kitchen that was small and cluttered and alive. Plants on every windowsill. Pots hanging from the ceiling, a kettle that whistled like a bird, steam rising in curls that caught the sunlight and turned into rainbows. She poured tea into chipped ceramic cups. She sat across from me and she began to speak. "Your mother's cancer was real," she said. "At first, the diagnosis, the treatment, the hospital, all real, but the prognosis was a lie." She wrapped her hands around her cup, warming them, though the day was warm and the kitchen was sunlit, and there was no reason for her to be cold except the cold that comes from memory, from truth, from the weight of secrets carried too long. "Your father, your real father, the man who existed before the drinking, before the absence, before the stepmother turned him into a puppet, he loved your mother. Truly, deeply, the kind of love that doesn't disappear when someone gets sick. The kind of love that makes you desperate, that makes you willing to do anything to save them." She paused, sipped her tea, looked at me with eyes that saw too much, that knew too much, that had watched my mother's plan unfold from the outside, helpless to stop it, helpless to help, only able to promise and wait and hope. "Your stepmother, Clarissa, she was your mother's oncologist's research partner, not a doctor herself, a fundraiser, a networker. A woman who understood that medicine was as much about money as it was about healing. She met your father at the hospital. She saw his desperation. She saw his wealth, and she saw an opportunity. I held my cup but didn't drink. My hands were steady, my heart was not. She told your father about an experimental treatment, expensive, exclusive, available only through private clinics in Switzerland. She said she had connections. She said she could save your mother. And your father, desperate, grieving, clinging to any hope, he believed her." Woman set down her cup. She reached into her pocket. She pulled out a photograph different from the one I had found but similar. The same cottage, the same garden, the same cat, younger, both ears intact. "Your mother didn't die in 2008, she said. She was taken, smuggled, hidden. Clarissa's experimental treatment was a lie. There was no clinic, no doctors, no hope, just a facility. A place where people disappear, where wealthy families hide inconvenient relatives, where the dead are kept alive but silent, unable to speak, unable to escape, unable to prove they ever existed." She slid the photograph across the table. I looked at it, my mother, standing in front of this cottage, but not free, not happy. Her smile was wrong, too tight, too careful, the smile of someone who was being watched, who knew that every moment was monitored, who had learned to perform happiness for an audience that would punish any deviation. Behind her, barely visible in the shadow of the porch, stood a man, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a suit that cost more than this cottage, my father. "Your father knew," the woman said. "Not at first, but eventually. He found out, he visited. He saw what Clarissa had done, not just to your mother, but to him. She had trapped them both, your mother as a prisoner, your father as a co-conspirator, too deep in the lie to escape without destroying himself." She paused, and then he made a choice, the worst choice, the choice that turned him from a victim into a monster. He chose to protect the lie, to protect Clarissa, to protect himself. He married her, he brought her home, he gave her access to his wealth, his company, his life. And he gave her, you. I closed my eyes, I saw my father's face. The face from my childhood, kind, present, alive. The face that had disappeared gradually, replaced by the hollow-eyed man who drank in his car, who worked 16-hour days, who couldn't look at me without seeing my mother, without seeing what he had done, without seeing the lie that had consumed his soul. He gave you to Clarissa as a hostage, the woman continued. A replacement, a thing to control, a servant to break. Because if you were broken, if you were reduced to furniture, to nothing, then you would never ask questions, you would never search for your mother, you would never discover the truth. She reached across the table. She touched my hand, the first human touch I had felt in years that wasn't violence or manipulation, the first touch that carried no debt, no ledger, no hidden calculation. Your mother escaped in 2011, she said. She found a way out, a nurse who pitied her. A guard who fell asleep, a door that was left unlocked. She ran to me. We had been friends in college, before the cancer, before the marriage, before everything. She told me everything, she made me promise. Promise what? I asked. My voice was barely audible, a whisper, a ghost's voice. To wait, she said, to watch, to protect the truth until you were ready, until you were strong enough, until you came looking. She squeezed my hand. She couldn't contact you directly. Clarissa monitored everything, your mail, your phone, your school, your friends. Any contact would have led them back to her. Any hint that she was alive would have resulted in her being taken again, or worse. Worse, the woman's eyes darkened. She withdrew her hand. She stood and walked to the window, looking out at the garden, the wildflowers, the cat sleeping in the sun. Clarissa has a facility, she said, not just for hiding people, for ending them quietly, permanently, no bodies, no evidence. No questions. Your mother was meant to go there eventually when Clarissa decided she was no longer useful as leverage, when your father finally stopped visiting, when the lie was so complete that no one would ever believe the truth. She turned to face me. Your mother escaped before that could happen, but she couldn't take you with her. She couldn't risk it. You were too closely watched, too controlled, too useful. The word hit me like a physical blow. Useful, the same word my stepmother used. The same word that defined my existence. The same word that had turned a boy into a servant, a son into furniture, a human being into a tool. But now I understood. It wasn't just cruelty. It was strategy. It was control. It was the mechanism by which Clarissa Whitfield maintained her empire, by breaking the things that might threaten her, by reducing people to functions, by making sure that no one ever had the strength or the knowledge or the freedom to fight back. I opened my eyes. I looked at the woman, my mother's friend, the keeper of her secrets, the guardian of a truth that had been hidden for 8 years. Where is she now? I asked. The woman shook her head. I don't know, she said. She left in 2013. She said she had found something, evidence, proof that could destroy Clarissa and free your father if he wanted to be freed. She said she was going to get it. She said she would come back for you. She paused, her eyes filled with tears she didn't shed. She never came back. I don't know if she's alive. I don't know if she's dead. I don't know if she's in the facility or free or somewhere in between. I only know that she made me promise to wait, to watch, to tell you the truth when you finally came. She walked back to the table. She sat down. She looked at me with an intensity that was almost painful, almost loving, almost like my mother's eyes had looked at me in the photograph, sad, strong, full of a hope that had survived against all odds. She believed in you, the woman said. Even when you were 8 years old, even when she was dying or pretending to die, she told me, Ethan is stronger than he knows. He will survive them. He will endure. And one day he will come looking for me, and when he does, tell him everything. Tell him I never stopped loving him. Tell him I never stopped fighting. Tell him the ledger is not just his. It's mine too, and one day we will balance it together. I sat in the cottage for 2 hours. I drank cold tea. I looked at photographs. I listened to stories about my mother, stories from before the cancer, before the marriage, before the transformation of a family into a prison. Stories about her laughter, her intelligence, her stubbornness, her refusal to accept the world as it was instead of how it should be. The woman told me everything, and I told her nothing, not about my death, not about my rebirth, not about the ledger or the knife or the clock that ticked at 11:47 p.m., not about Marcus or Julian or Dimitri or the folder of secrets hidden under my mattress, because some truths are too heavy to share, because some burdens are meant to be carried alone. Because I was still a ghost, still a weapon, still a boy who had died and been reborn with a purpose that no one else could understand or share. But when I stood to leave, when I walked to the door, when I paused with my hand on the frame and the afternoon sun warm on my face, I turned back. Thank you, I said, and I meant it, not just for the truth, not just for the waiting, not just for the promise kept across 8 years of silence, but for the proof that my mother had loved me. That she had fought for me, that she had never stopped, even when I was furniture, even when I was a servant, even when I was a dead boy with a knife in his chest and a clock on the wall. She had believed in me. And that belief, that terrible, beautiful, fragile belief, was the most powerful weapon I had ever discovered, more powerful than the folder, more powerful than the recordings, more powerful than revenge itself, because it meant I was not alone, even in my invisibility. Even in my servitude, even in my death, someone had seen me, someone had loved me, someone had kept the light burning in the darkness, waiting for me to find my way home. I walked back through the garden. The cat woke up. It looked at me with amber eyes, the same shade as the woman's, the same shade as my mother's in the photograph. It stretched, it yawned. It went back to sleep. I opened the gate, I stepped onto the road. And I heard the woman's voice behind me, soft but clear, carrying across the wildflowers and the afternoon sun and the 8 years of waiting. Ethan, she said. I turned. Your mother left something else. Something she said you would need, when you were ready, when you had the truth. She held out a small box. Wooden. Carved with a pattern I recognized, my mother's initials, intertwined with mine, the same pattern she had drawn on my birthday cards, on my lunchbox notes, on the wall above my bed when I was small enough to need protection from the dark. I took it, I opened it. Inside was a key, small, brass, old, and a note in my mother's handwriting, the same handwriting from the photograph, the same M with the flourish at the top and the tail at the bottom. Facility, 247 Westbrook Lane. The basement. This key opens the east wing. The records are there, every prisoner, every name, every date, proof that Clarissa has been running this operation for 15 years, proof that your father knew, proof that the Whitfield fortune was built on silence and suffering. Burn it down, Ethan, burn it all down, but first find me. I'm still out there, I'm still fighting, and I'm still waiting for my son to come home. I closed the box, I put it in my pocket. I walked away. The sun was setting when I reached the bus stop. The sky was orange and red and purple, the colors of fire, of destruction, of the world ending and beginning again. I sat on the bench, I opened my notebook, and I wrote, Entry 8, the cottage, the woman, the truth, my mother is alive, or was alive in 2013. She escaped Clarissa's facility in 2011. She found evidence, she was going to expose everything. She disappeared in 2013, I don't know if she's alive. I don't know if she's dead, I don't know if she's free or imprisoned or somewhere in between, but I have a key, an address, a mission 247 Westbrook Lane, the East Wing, the records. This changes everything. The ledger was about revenge, about making them pay for what they did to me. But now it's about more. It's about her, about finding her, about saving her, about finishing what she started. 2 ledgers, 2 paths. The path of revenge, Marcus, the board, the exposure, the destruction of the Whitfield image. And the path of rescue, the facility, the records, the truth that could destroy not just a family but an empire. I don't know which path to take first. I don't know if I can walk both. I don't know if I have the strength, the time, the patience. But I know this, I am not furniture. I am not a servant. I am not a ghost. I am Ethan Whitfield, son of a woman who never stopped fighting. Heir to a ledger of debts that spans 15 years. And I am done being invisible. The game has changed. The stakes are higher, and the clock is ticking. Tick, tock, 11:47 p.m. the time of my death, the time of my rebirth, the time when everything begins. I closed the notebook. The bus arrived. I got on. And as the city passed outside the window, the Whitfield mansion growing closer, the lights of my prison growing brighter, the night swallowing the last of the sunset, I felt something I hadn't felt since I was 8 years old. Purpose, not just revenge, not just survival, but purpose. The purpose of a son who had discovered that his mother was alive. The purpose of a boy who had died and been reborn, not just to destroy but to save. The purpose of Ethan Whitfield. Furniture, servant, ghost, ledger, weapon, and finally, human being. The house was dark when I arrived. My stepmother's study was empty. My father's car was gone. Marcus's room was silent, no music, no girls, no sounds of a golden boy living a golden life. I climbed the stairs to my room. I locked the door. I hid the box, my mother's box, her key, her note, her hope, in the safest place I knew, under the floorboard beneath my bed. The same floorboard where in my first life I had hidden my notebook. The notebook that had been found after my death, the notebook that had been burned, the notebook that had been erased like everything else about me. But this box would not be burned, this key would not be erased, this hope would not be destroyed, because I was not the boy I had been, I was the ledger. And the ledger was permanent. At 10:30 p.m. there was a knock at my door, soft, hesitant, not my stepmother's commanding rap. Not my father's drunken stumble, something else, something uncertain. I opened the door. Marcus stood in the frame, different from last night. Sober now, dressed in sweatpants and a t-shirt that had seen better days. His hair was messy, his eyes were red, he looked like he hadn't slept. Ethan, he said, and his voice was different too, not the cruelty, not the contempt, something else. Something that might have been if I was generous, if I was hopeful, if I was willing to believe that even monsters had mothers, vulnerability. I need to talk to you, he said. About what you said, about being real, about, he paused. His hands were shaking, not like Julian's tremor, not like the symptom of debt and desperation, but like the shaking of someone who was standing on the edge of something terrifying and didn't know whether to jump or run. About what? I asked. He looked at me. Really looked for the first time in 16 years, and he said, about mother, about the tests, about what she's been doing, what she's been making me do, what she's been making all of us do. He paused, his voice dropped to a whisper. I found something, Ethan, in her study, something that changes everything, something that I think you need to see. He held out his hand, a photograph, not my mother's photograph, not the cottage. Not the garden, a different photograph, a building tall, concrete, windowless, surrounded by a fence topped with barbed wire, and on the back in my stepmother's precise, controlled handwriting, 247 Westbrook Lane, Phase 2, ready for expansion. I looked at Marcus, I looked at the photograph. I looked at the address that matched my mother's key, my mother's note, my mother's desperate hope for rescue, and I felt the world shift beneath my feet, not just the ledger of revenge. Not just the ledger of rescue, but something new, something terrible, something that made me realize that my stepmother's empire was larger than I had imagined, that her cruelty was deeper than I had known, that her reach extended far beyond our family, our city, our understanding of what evil could accomplish. Marcus was looking at me with eyes that were not cruel but frightened, not contemptuous but desperate. Not the eyes of a golden boy, but the eyes of a prisoner who had finally seen the bars of his cage. "Ethan," he whispered, "what is that place? What is Phase 2, and why?" He paused, his voice broke. "Why does Mother have a file with your mother's name in it?" Marcus didn't speak on the bus ride to the cottage. He sat by the window, forehead pressed against the glass, watching the city shrink into suburbs, then fields, then the kind of nowhere that doesn't appear on maps. I sat beside him. Close enough to stop him if he ran, far enough that he didn't feel trapped. He hadn't asked where we were going. He just followed me out of the house, down the stairs, into the night, like a sleepwalker, like a man who had already made his choice and was simply waiting to see where it led. The bus driver didn't look at us. Two boys in school blazers, carrying nothing, going nowhere at 11 p.m. Not his problem. We got off at the last stop. A crossroads with a flickering streetlight and a sign pointing to towns that didn't exist anymore. I led Marcus down a dirt path, through a gate that squealed, past a garden that had swallowed any pretense of order. The cottage was dark, no lights in the windows. The cat was gone or sleeping or simply didn't care. I knocked. Nothing. I knocked again, harder. The door opened a crack. Amber eyes in the gap. The woman, my mother's friend, the keeper of ashes, studied me, then Marcus, then the space between us where something unspoken had settled like dust. "You brought him," she said. "He needs to see." She stepped back, let us in, didn't offer tea this time. Just stood against the wall, arms crossed, watching Marcus the way you watch a fire that might spread. Marcus walked to the kitchen table. The photographs were still there, my mother in the garden, my father in the shadows, the cottage with its wildflowers and its secrets. He picked one up, held it to the light. His hands shook. "That's her," he said, "not a question. Your mother, the one who died, supposedly died." He set the photograph down, picked up another, then another. Moving faster now, like a man eating, like a man drowning, like a man who had been starved of truth and was suddenly surrounded by it. "She looks like you," he said finally. "The eyes, the way she holds her head, like she's waiting for someone to hit her but she won't flinch." I said nothing. Marcus turned to me. His face was wet. I hadn't seen him cry. Not when his dog died, not when he failed his driving test 3 times, not when his father forgot his birthday for the 5th year running. "Ethan," he said, "that place in the photograph, 247 Westbrook, I know it." Room went still. The woman stopped breathing. The clock on the wall, a different clock, cheaper but still ticking, seemed to slow. I asked. "Mother took me there once when I was 12. He wiped his face with his sleeve, leaving a streak of snot and shame. "She said it was a hospital for people who were too sick for normal hospitals. She said my grandmother was there, her mother, that she'd been sick for years and we couldn't visit because it would upset her." He laughed, a broken sound, like stepping on glass. There was no grandmother. I'd never heard of a grandmother. And the building, it didn't look like a hospital. No windows, no ambulances, just a gate and guards and a smell. He shuddered, like cleaning products, like they were trying to cover something up. He sat down hard, the chair creaked. "She made me sign something, a form. I was 12. I didn't read it. She said it was for the visitor log, but now," he looked at me, "now I think it was something else, something that made me complicit, that made me part of it without knowing." Woman spoke for the first time. "The facility requires family signatures, for intake, for transfer, for," she paused, "for disposal. If a family member signs, there's no investigation, no questions, just a sick relative who didn't make it. A quiet funeral, a closed file." Marcus put his head in his hands. "I signed," he whispered. "I signed something, I don't know what, but I signed." I watched him. This boy who had kicked me, cut me, killed me. This golden boy with his perfect grades and his purchased life and his hands that had held a knife at 11:47 p.m. He looked small now, smaller than me. Smaller than the servant boy who scrubbed his floors and cooked his meals and died in his kitchen, not because he was weak, because he was finally seeing the cage, the same cage I had lived in, just gilded, just warmer. Just with better food and softer pillows and the illusion that the door was open when it had been locked from the start. "Marcus," I said. He didn't look up. "Marcus." Harder this time, he raised his head. Eyes red, nose running, the face of a child who had just learned that monsters were real and they looked like his mother. "That form you signed," I said. "Do you remember the date?" He blinked. "What? The date? On the form? Do you remember?" He stared at me, then his eyes changed. Something flickered. A memory surfacing, fighting through years of suppression and privilege and the deliberate forgetting that wealthy children learn like a second language. "March," he said slowly. "March 15th. She made a joke about it, the Ides of March, she said. She said it was fitting, that some things should die on the day that Caesar died. March 15th, 2011, the same date on my mother's photograph. The same date she had escaped, or been moved, or been hidden, or been erased more thoroughly than before." I looked at the woman, she looked back, her face was stone. Your mother was there, I said to Marcus. At the facility on that day, the same day you signed a form you didn't read, the same day my mother supposedly died but didn't. I walked to the table. I picked up the photograph of my mother in the garden. I held it in front of his face. Look at her, Marcus. Look at her eyes. Look at her smile. This is what your mother tried to erase. This is what your family paid to hide. This is what you signed away without knowing. He really looked, and something broke in him, not dramatically, not with tears or shouting or the theatrical collapse of a golden boy discovering his throne was built on bones, just a small break, a hairline fracture, the kind of break that doesn't show immediately but weakens the foundation that makes the whole structure vulnerable to the next storm. I didn't know, he said. I believe you. I would have. Stopped her, told someone. Refused to sign. I set the photograph down. You were 12, Marcus, you were a child, and she was your mother, and she had already spent 10 years teaching you that she was God and you were nothing without her. I paused. You couldn't have stopped her, any more than I could have stopped her from turning me into furniture, any more than my father could have stopped her from taking my mother. She's not a person, Marcus, she's a system, a machine, and machines don't stop because children cry. He was quiet for a long time then. What do we do? I looked at the woman. She shook her head slightly, a warning, a caution, a reminder that some paths once taken couldn't be untaken. We go to the facility, I said. We use the key, we find the records, and we see what's really there. Tonight, Marcus stood. He wiped his face. He straightened his blazer, the same blazer his mother had bought him, the same blazer that marked him as a Whitfield, as golden, as belonging to a world that ate people like me and spat out the bones. Then he took it off. He folded it, carefully, neatly, the way a servant folds clothes, the way I had folded his shirts for 10 years. He set it on the table. Underneath, he was just a boy, pale, thin, scared, the same boy he had been at 12, before the form, before the signature, before the machine had claimed him completely. Not going back, he said. Not to her, not to that house, not to being golden. He looked at me. I don't know what I am without it. But I know I can't be that anymore. I nodded. I didn't trust him. Not completely. Not yet. The ledger had taught me that trust was a currency that bought only disappointment, that every kindness carried interest, that every alliance was temporary until the debt came due. But I needed him for the facility, for the records, for the signature that might open doors that my key couldn't. And maybe, just maybe, because some part of me, the part that had died at 11:47 p.m. and been reborn with a mother's hope pressed against my heart, wanted to believe that even Marcus Whitfield could be more than his mother's machine. We leave in 10 minutes, I said. The woman will drive us. She knows the way. I don't know the way, the woman said. You know the area, the back roads, the places that don't appear on maps. I looked at her. You helped my mother escape. You know how to move without being seen. She didn't deny it, just picked up her keys from the counter and walked to the door. Marcus and I followed. The night swallowed us whole. The facility appeared at 1:47 am. Not suddenly, we saw the lights first, a glow on the horizon that didn't belong to stars or houses or anything natural. Then the fence, then the gate. Then the building itself, rising from the flat land like a concrete fist, windowless, featureless, designed to be forgotten. The woman stopped the car a quarter-mile away. We walked the rest. The fence was higher than it looked in photographs. The barbed wire was new, glinting in the moonlight. The gate had a keypad, a camera, a sign that said private property in letters that didn't invite questions. I pulled out the key. It was small in my hand. Ridiculous almost, this tiny brass thing against a fortress of concrete and steel. The key to the east wing my mother had written. The records are there. I walked along the fence, Marcus behind me, the woman behind him, until I found a door I hadn't seen from the road. Small, rusted, overgrown with weeds that had been trained by neglect to hide what they covered. The key fit. The lock turned with a sound like a bone breaking. The door opened. The corridor beyond was narrow. Concrete walls, concrete floor. A smell that was exactly what Marcus had described. Cleaning products, industrial, aggressive, the smell of something trying to erase itself. We walked in single file, me first, then Marcus. Then the woman, her hand in her pocket, gripping something I couldn't see. The corridor turned left, then right, then opened into a larger space, a room with shelves, files, boxes labeled with dates and names and numbers that didn't mean anything yet. The records. I walked to the nearest shelf, pulled out a box, opened it. Files, hundreds of them, each with a photograph, a name, a date of intake, a date of something else. Some had both dates filled in. Some had only the first, the second left blank, waiting. I found my mother's file, Elena Whitfield. Intake, September 14, 2008. Method, voluntary commitment, false. Discharge, March 15, 2011. Method, escaped. Underneath, in a different handwriting someone had added, March 22, 2011. Transferred to phase 2, the same phrase from my stepmother's file. The same building Marcus had visited. The same form he had signed. I turned the page and found a photograph. Not my mother, not the cottage, not the garden, a room, white walls, no windows, a bed with straps, a chair with restraints, and in the chair, barely recognizable, barely human, was a woman who might have been my mother once. Hair shaved, eyes vacant, arms marked with tracks that could have been needles or could have been something worse. The date on the photograph, March 20, 2011, 5 days after her escape. 5 days after the cottage, the garden, the smile, 5 days after she had been free, I stared at the photograph. I didn't feel rage. I didn't feel grief. I felt nothing, a perfect hollow nothing, like the room in the photograph, like the building around us, like the machine that had done this and kept doing it and would keep doing it until someone stopped it. Ethan, Marcus whispered. I didn't answer. Ethan, we need to go. Someone's coming. I heard it then. Footsteps, distant but approaching. The sound of guards, of orderlies, of the machine's immune system responding to infection. I closed the file. I put it back in the box. I turned to Marcus and the woman. I said, and we ran. The corridor was longer going back. The turns confused. The smell of cleaning products grew stronger, mixed now with something else, sweat, fear, the particular odor of people who had been running too long. We reached the door. The woman went through first. Marcus second. I paused at the threshold, looking back at the shelves, the files, the thousands of names that no one remembered, the thousands of lives that had been reduced to boxes and photographs and dates. I pulled out my notebook. I wrote one line fast in the dark. Entry 9, she's here. Phase 2, alive but not living. I will come back. I will burn it down. But first I will survive. Ran the night air hit like a slap. Cold, real, alive. We ran to the car. The woman started it without lights. We drove in darkness, on dirt roads, through fields that swallowed the sound of the engine. No one followed, or if they did, they let us go, because we were small, because we were children. Because the machine didn't fear children who ran, it feared children who came back with matches. I sat in the back seat, Marcus beside me, both of us breathing hard, both of us smelling of concrete and fear and the particular dust of places where people disappeared. Marcus reached into his pocket. Pulled out something I hadn't seen him take, a file, not my mother's. Another one, he opened it. Held it to the light of a passing street lamp as we reached the edge of the city, a photograph of a woman. Young, dark hair, eyes that looked like mine, like my mother's, like something that had been passed down through blood and silence and the particular cruelty of families that ate their own. The name on the file, Clarissa Vance, Marcus's mother. Intake date, 6 months before Marcus was born. Discharge date, never. Status, phase 2, permanent. Marcus looked at me. I looked at him. And in his eyes, in the red-rimmed, tear-streaked, broken eyes of the boy who had killed me, I saw something that hadn't been there before. Not rage, not revenge, just understanding. The understanding that we were both children of the machine. Both products of a system that erased women and replaced them with something else. Both fighting to survive in a world that had decided we were useful only as long as we stayed quiet. She's not my mother, Marcus said. His voice was flat, empty. The voice of a boy who had just discovered that his entire life was built on a substitution, a replacement, a lie. The woman who raised me, Clarissa, she's not. She was never. He couldn't finish. I finished for him. She was a patient, like my mother, like all of them. The machine took her identity, gave her yours, made her into something she wasn't, so she could make you into something you weren't. I paused. Your real mother is in there, Marcus, in phase 2, alive but not living, like mine. He closed the file, he put it back in his pocket, and he didn't speak for the rest of the ride. The woman dropped us at a bus stop 3 miles from the Whitfield mansion. Go home, she said. Pretend, be furniture, be golden, until you're ready. Ready for what? Marcus asked. She didn't answer. Just drove away, her taillights disappearing into the dark, leaving us alone at a bus stop in a city that didn't know we existed. We walked home, side by side, not speaking, not touching. 2 boys who had been enemies, who had been master and servant, who had been killer and killed, now bound by something deeper than hatred. The understanding that we were both ghosts, that we were both fighting the same machine. That the ledger had room for more than one name. We reached the house at 4:30 a.m. The lights were on in my stepmother's study. She was waiting, not for us, for something else. For a phone call perhaps, for news of intruders at her facility. For confirmation that the machine was still running, still swallowing, still erasing. Marcus walked to the stairs, paused, turned back. Ethan, he said. I looked at him. Tomorrow, the board meeting, the one about Mrs. Patterson. He took a breath. I'm going to tell the truth, about the tests, about Julian, about everything. I'm going to stand up in front of everyone and say that I cheated, that my mother paid for it, that Mrs. Patterson was right. He waited for my reaction. I gave him none. Be destroyed, I said. Your golden life, your college prospects, your mother's protection, all of it, gone. I know, she'll disown you, cut you off, maybe worse. I know. Looked at me, really looked, the way he had looked at the photograph of my mother, the way he had looked at the file of his own. Eyes that were finally seeing something beyond the reflection of his own perfection. Because, he said, I signed a form when I was 12. I didn't know what it was, but I signed it, and that makes me part of this, part of the machine, part of. He stopped, swallowed, part of what happened to your mother, to my mother, to all of them. He turned, walked up the stairs. At the top he paused. And because, he said, not turning around, you were right, about what you said in my room, I'm not real. I've never been real, but maybe I can be. He disappeared into the darkness of the upper floor. I stood in the hallway. The clock on the wall ticked. 4:47. I'm not 11:47 p.m. A different time. A different death. A different choice. I walked to my room. I locked the door. I opened my notebook and I wrote. Entry 10. Marcus is going to confess. Tomorrow, in public, he will destroy himself to save Mrs. Patterson. To hurt the machine. To become something other than golden. I paused then. I don't know if he's doing it for me, for his real mother, for himself, or because he has no other choice, because once you see the cage, you can't unsee it, and living inside it becomes impossible. I closed the notebook. I lay on my bed. I didn't sleep. I waited for morning, and for whatever would come with it. The boardroom smelled the same as before: old wood, older politics, the particular dust of decisions made by people who would never face consequences. But this time the chairs were fuller. Word had spread. A golden boy about to confess. A family about to crack. The audience wanted blood and they didn't care whose. I sat in the back row. Same seat, same shadows. But different now. Marcus had seen me here, knew where I watched, and his eyes kept drifting to my corner like a compass needle seeking north. Mrs. Patterson sat at the center table. She wore the same navy dress, but something had shifted in her posture. Straighter, lighter, the look of a woman who had already lost her job, her reputation, her place in the world, and discovered she could survive without them. The chairman called the meeting to order. His voice cracked on the word order, like even he knew this was theatre, not governance. Whitfield has requested additional time to present new evidence regarding her son's academic integrity. However, before we proceed, Marcus Whitfield has asked to address the board. Marcus stood. His blazer was pressed. His hair was combed. His hands were steady. Only I could see the tremor, slight, hidden, the same tremor Julian Vance had carried, the same tremor of a man who had seen the cage and couldn't pretend anymore. Members of the board, he said. His voice carried, not loud but clear, the voice of a golden boy who had spent his life being heard. I need to tell you about my grades, about my tests, about the tutors my mother hired and the answers they provided and the lies I've told. The doors burst open. My stepmother entered like a storm in silk. 2 police officers flanked her, hands on belts, eyes scanning the room for threats that didn't exist. Behind them, a man in a suit I didn't recognize carried a briefcase that clicked when he set it down, the sound of locks, of evidence, of traps springing shut. Forgive the interruption, my stepmother said. She didn't sound apologetic. She sounded victorious. But I have evidence that casts serious doubt on my son's mental state and on the influence that has been exerted upon him. She pointed at Marcus, then at me. These boys broke into a private medical facility last night. They stole confidential patient records. They are mentally unstable, dangerous. She paused, letting the words settle like dust on a coffin. I have security footage. Man in the suit opened his briefcase. He pulled out a photograph, large, glossy, professionally printed. He held it up. There we were, Marcus and me, standing in the records room at 247 Westbrook Lane. Holding my mother's file, the concrete walls behind us, the shelves of names, the fluorescent light that turned our faces the color of corpses, a photograph that shouldn't exist, a room with no cameras. I had checked. I had looked for the telltale red lights, the black domes, the reflections in glass that betrayed surveillance. Nothing. The facility was designed to be invisible, unrecorded, unprovable, and yet someone had been watching, someone who knew we would come. Someone who wanted us to find exactly what we found, exactly when we found it. The machine didn't just swallow people. It planned, it waited, it let you think you were winning. Ethan Whitfield, my stepmother said, and my name in her mouth was a curse, a diagnosis, a death sentence. My stepson, a troubled boy, obsessed with his mother's death, convinced she's alive. He has been unwell for years, secret journals, paranoid delusions, and now he has infected my son with his madness. She pulled out another photograph, my notebook open on my bed, the pages visible, the handwriting mine filling every line. Entry 1, the ledger of debts. Entry 4, the test. Marcus scored 100%. Entry 8, she's here. Phase 2. Entry 10, Marcus is going to confess. She had photographed my notebook, my private thoughts, my plans, my ledger. The violation was physical, like a hand in my chest, pulling out something I had kept hidden even from myself. These are the writings of a disturbed mind, she said. A boy who believes he died and was reborn, who believes he can predict the future, who has convinced my son, my vulnerable, impressionable son, to join him in a fantasy of persecution and revenge. Room was silent. The board members looked at me, not with suspicion, with pity, the worst kind of look, the look that says you are broken and we are glad we are not you. Mrs. Patterson stood. This is irrelevant, she said. Her voice was steady, but her hands shook. Whether Ethan Whitfield is troubled or not, it doesn't change the fact that Marcus cheated, that I have evidence that this family has engaged in systematic academic fraud. My stepmother smiled, the same smile, the one that didn't reach her eyes. Mrs. Patterson, she said, and her voice was honey and arsenic. Your evidence is a test with a false answer. A clever trap, certainly, but traps can be baited, and bait can be planted. She pulled out another paper from her briefcase. This is a sworn statement from Julian Vance. He admits that he planted the false answer in the stolen test key, that he did so at your request, that you paid him to create this incident to discredit my son. She held it up. Julian's signature, Julian's confession, Julian's betrayal, but Julian was in Dimitri's debt. Julian was terrified. Julian had handed me a folder of secrets in a coffee shop at 8:00 p.m., shaking, desperate, willing to do anything to survive. And now he had signed a statement saying I was the fraud, that Mrs. Patterson was the conspirator, that my stepmother was the victim, Dmitri, the name on the phone, the debt collector, the man I had called to pressure Julian. Had he been working for her all along? Had the entire meeting, the coffee shop, the folder, the trembling left hand been staged? The machine was larger than I knew. Its gears turned in directions I hadn't imagined. It didn't just crush people, it recruited them, turned them, used their desperation against them until they served its purpose without knowing they served. Mrs. Patterson, the chairman said. His voice was different now. Softer, regretful. Voice of a man who had made his decision and wanted to be done with it. Given these new developments, given the evidence of conspiracy, I'm afraid we have no choice but to suspend our investigation into Marcus's academic record and to initiate a separate inquiry into your conduct. Patterson sat down hard, the chair creaked, her face went grey. I stood up, the back row, the shadows, the place where no one looked because nothing ever happened. She's lying, I said, my voice was small. 16 years old, servant soft, the voice of furniture, but it carried every word, the facility, the records. My mother, she's alive, she's in there, phase 2, I saw her file, I saw. Ethan, my stepmother said, not angry, concerned, the perfect performance of maternal worry. Please don't do this to yourself, don't embarrass yourself further. We can get you help, good doctors, the best care, but first you need to admit that none of this is real, that your mother is dead. That she died in 2008, that you watched her funeral. I had not watched her funeral, I had been kept home. Too upsetting for a child. The staff had told me. The same staff who cooked my meals and washed my clothes and never looked me in the eye, but I didn't say that because in the silence that followed my stepmother's words I heard something. A sound from the doorway, a movement, a presence that hadn't been there before. I turned. A woman stood in the frame, tall, thin. Hair shaved close to the scalp. Eyes that were not vacant, not empty, but filled with a fire that had survived years of burning. She wore a white coat, a doctor's coat. The kind my stepmother's oncologist partner might have worn, the kind that gave authority, that commanded attention, that turned a prisoner into a professional. But underneath the coat I saw the tracks on her arms, the same tracks from the photograph, my mother, alive. Standing in the doorway of the boardroom where her son was being called mad, where her husband sat silent, where the woman who had imprisoned her smiled with the confidence of someone who had never lost a game she controlled. Clarissa, my mother said, her voice was rough, unused, the voice of someone who had not spoken in years or who had spoken only when forced, only when punished, only when the machine demanded performance. You forgot one thing, she said. My stepmother's smile faltered. For the first time, a crack, a hairline fracture in the perfect porcelain. You forgot, my mother continued, walking into the room, her white coat brushing against the board members who shrank back, who didn't know what they were seeing, who sensed something terrible and ancient and unstoppable, that phase 2 has an exit protocol. For patients who prove, cooperative, who perform well, who demonstrate that the treatment has succeeded. She reached into her coat pocket, pulled out a phone. A small, cheap phone, the kind that couldn't be traced, the kind that prisoners smuggled, the kind that connected to the world outside the concrete walls. And you forgot, she said, that I have been cooperative for 15 years, that I have performed every role you assigned. Patient, prisoner, ghost, that I have earned your trust so completely that you let me walk out of that facility today, alone, unescorted, because you believed I was cured. She held up the phone, the screen was on. Recording playing, my stepmother's voice, clear and cold and unmistakable. The facility requires family signatures, for intake, for transfer, for disposal. If a family member signs, there's no investigation, no questions, just a sick relative who didn't make it. Room was silent, my stepmother's face had changed. The crack had widened, the porcelain was shattering, revealing something underneath that was not beautiful, not controlled, but raw and desperate and cornered. That's not, she started. Your voice, my mother said, your words, your confession, recorded yesterday, in your office, where you thought you were safe, where you thought no one could hear. She looked at me for the first time in 8 years, in 16 years, in a lifetime of separation and silence and the particular cruelty of families that eat their own. Ethan, she said, and her voice was different now, not rough, not unused, but warm, alive. The voice from the lunchbox notes, the birthday cards, the bedtime stories before the cancer, before the lie, before everything. I told you to find me, she said, and you did. She walked to me through the boardroom, through the silence, through the shattered remains of my stepmother's perfect world. She stopped in front of me, she reached out, she touched my face, her hand was cold, thin. Marked with scars that I didn't recognize, that told stories I couldn't imagine, that spoke of years in a room with white walls and no windows and the particular madness of being erased while still breathing. But it was her hand, her touch, her. Taller, she said, and she smiled, the smile from the photograph, the smile from my memory. The smile that had survived 8 years of imprisonment, of erasure, of the machine's attempt to turn her into nothing. I didn't cry, I had forgotten how. But I felt something crack inside me. Not the cold thing, not the ledger, not the weapon I had forged in death and rebirth, something else, something that might have been a boy, a son, someone who had once been loved and had spent 10 years believing that love was a lie, only to discover that it had been fighting for him all along, in rooms with white walls and no windows, in the darkest place the machine could build. Mom, I said, the word was small, broken. The word of a child who had been told his mother was dead, who had scrubbed floors and cooked meals and died with a knife in his chest, who had been reborn not for revenge but for this, for her, for the touch of a hand that remembered his face. The police officers moved, not toward me, not toward my mother, toward my stepmother, because in the silence while we stood there, mother and son, touching for the first time in 8 years, someone had made a call. Someone had sent the recording. Someone had activated the protocol that my mother had spent 15 years preparing, 15 years pretending, 15 years being cooperative and performing and earning the trust of a machine that didn't understand that patience was a weapon too. My stepmother stood, frozen, her perfect suit, her perfect hair, her perfect smile, shattered into pieces on the floor. Whitfield, one officer said. You are under arrest for kidnapping, false imprisonment, medical fraud and conspiracy to commit murder. She didn't resist, she didn't speak, she just looked at my mother. At me, at the two people she had tried to erase, who had survived her machine, who had found each other in the wreckage of her empire. And for a moment, just a flicker in the destruction, I saw something in her eyes that wasn't rage or contempt or the cold calculation of a woman who had never lost. I saw fear, the same fear Marcus had shown in my doorway at 11:47 p.m., the same fear I had carried for 10 years. The fear of a prisoner who had finally seen the bars of her own caged room emptied slowly, board members filing out, whispering, already rewriting the narrative in their minds, not a golden family and a mad servant boy, but a conspiracy of silence and a mother's love that had outlasted concrete walls and barbed wire and 15 years of erasure. Mrs. Patterson stopped at the door. She looked back at me, at my mother, at the two of us standing in the center of the room, still touching, still afraid to let go, still not quite believing that the world had finally turned right side up. Thank you, she said, and she left. Marcus was the last to go. He stood in the doorway, his blazer wrinkled, his golden life in ruins around him, his hands empty of everything except the file he had stolen, the file of his real mother, Clarissa Vance, patient prisoner ghost. Ethan, he said. I looked at him. My mother, he said. The real one, she's still in there, phase 2, even if your mom got out. The others didn't, the machine is still running. He was right, the arrest was one gear, one piece. The machine was larger than my stepmother, older than her empire, fed by other families, other signatures, other forms signed by children who didn't know what they were agreeing to. Then we keep going, I said. My mother squeezed my hand. Her grip was weak but certain. The grip of someone who had learned that strength wasn't about holding on tight but about refusing to let go. We keep going, she repeated. And for the first time the ledger felt less like a weapon and more like a promise. We walked out of the boardroom together, mother and son, ghost and ghost, two people who had been erased and had refused to stay gone. The sun was setting. The sky was the color of fire, of destruction, of the world ending and beginning again. My father's car was in the parking lot. He sat in the driver's seat, head on the steering wheel, not moving, not drinking, just existing in the space between the life he had chosen and the truth he had finally been forced to see. I didn't approach him. That was a different ledger. A different debt for a different day. My mother and I walked to the bus stop. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. We had 15 years to catch up on. 15 years of silence and suffering and the particular miracle of survival. We would talk eventually. We would cry eventually. We would learn each other again, slowly, carefully, like two people rebuilding a house from ashes. But not yet. For now we just walked, side by side, alive that night in a motel room paid for with the last of my savings from years of hidden tips and stolen change. I opened my notebook. I turned to a fresh page, and I wrote, Entry 11, she's here, she's real, she's alive. I paused. Then, the ledger is not closed. The machine is still running. Phase 2 still holds prisoners, including Marcus's mother, including hundreds of others whose families signed forms they didn't raid, paid debts they didn't owe, believed lies they were desperate to believe. Another pause. But tonight I am not writing debts, I am writing gratitude. To a woman who spent 15 years being cooperative so she could walk out of hell. To a son, me, who refused to become furniture. To a brother, Marcus, who chose truth over gold. I closed the notebook. I looked at my mother, sleeping on the other bed, her shaved head on the pillow, her scarred arms curled around her chest, her breathing steady and deep and alive. I turned off the light. And I slept for the first time in 10 years without dreams of knives, without clocks ticking toward 11:47 p.m., without the weight of a ledger pressing against my chest. Just sleep, just peace, just the impossible, beautiful, fragile fact of being alive. The courtroom smelled of floor wax and fear. My father sat in the witness box, his suit hanging loose where drinking had melted the weight off him, his hands clasped so tight the knuckles showed white. He hadn't looked at my stepmother since entering. His eyes kept finding my mother in the gallery, then darting away, like he couldn't bear what he saw and couldn't stop looking. The prosecutor was a woman named Helen Voss. 50, sharp-shouldered, with the patience of someone who had learned that justice was not a lightning bolt but a slow leak, wearing away stone one drop at a time. Mr. Whitfield, she said, when did you first learn that your wife, Elena, was alive after her supposed death in 2008? My father's throat worked. He reached for the water glass mist, caught it with a trembling hand. The sound of ice rattling filled the silence. March 2009, he said. 6 months after the funeral, I received a letter, no return address, just a photograph. Alina standing in front of a building I didn't recognize, and a note, "They're lying to you, find me." Set the glass down without drinking. I didn't find her, I was drinking then, heavily, I could barely function. Clarissa, my second wife, she handled everything. The company, the house, he paused. The boy, me, the boy, the furniture. "And when did you discover the truth about the facility?" My father's hands tightened on the railing of the witness box. The wood creaked. 2010. I followed Clarissa. She went to 247 Westbrook Lane. I waited in the car. I saw patients being moved, in wheelchairs, with restraints, not sick people, not people receiving treatment, people being. He stopped, swallowed, stored like inventory, like things. Courtroom was silent. Even the reporters had stopped typing. My stepmother sat at the defense table, her orange jumpsuit a color she would have called vulgar in another life, her face a mask that was finally cracking under the weight of too many performances. Did you confront her? No. My father's voice was barely audible. I was afraid. She had evidence of my drinking, of other things. She said if I challenged her, she would expose me, destroy the company, take Marcus, and she would send Alina back to phase 2. Permanently, he looked at my mother again. This time he didn't look away. So I made a deal. I would marry her. I would give her access to everything. I would become what she wanted. In exchange, Alina would live. She would remain in the facility, but she would not be disposed of. She would be, he laughed, a broken sound, preserved, like a specimen, like a memory of what I had lost. My mother's hand found mine in the gallery. Her grip was hard, her palm rough with scars, but her fingers interlaced with mine like they had done this 1,000 times before in another life, before the cancer and the lie and the machine. "Ethan," the prosecutor asked, "your son, what did you do to protect him?" My father's face changed. Something collapsed in it, some final wall that had been holding back the flood. "Nothing," he whispered. "I did nothing," Clarissa said. She said if I showed him attention, if I treated him like a son, he would become suspicious. He would ask questions. He would look for his mother. So I withdrew. I drank. I made myself absent. I told myself it was protection. That by ignoring him, by letting Clarissa reduce him to furniture, I was keeping him safe, keeping him small, keeping him invisible enough to survive. He looked at me for the first time in 8 years. Maybe longer. "Ethan," he said. Not to the prosecutor, not to the court, to me. "I watched you, every day, from my office window, from my car, from the doorway of rooms I was too afraid to enter. I watched you cook and clean and shrink yourself into nothing. And I told myself it was necessary, that the alternative, that Clarissa deciding you were a threat, that you needed to be silenced, that you needed to be." He stopped. "I told myself that a living ghost was better than a dead son." The words hung in the air. A living ghost better than dead. The math of a father who had chosen absence over action, complicity over resistance, slow erosion over sudden death. I felt my mother's grip tighten. Not in anger, in recognition. She had made her own calculations in that white room, had performed cooperation to survive, had traded dignity for breath. We were all accountants in the ledger of the machine, all balancing debts we hadn't chosen. "Mr. Whitfield," the prosecutor said. Her voice was gentler now. The gentleness of someone who knew she had one who could afford mercy. "Did you ever help Alina escape?" My father nodded. 2011, March, I found the key, the address of the cottage. A contact, a friend from Alina's college. I arranged everything, I thought if she was free I could find a way to follow, to start over, to be the man I had been before. He looked down at his hands. Clarissa found out. Within a week, she had contacts in the facility. People who owed her. She recaptured Alina, moved her to phase 2, and she made me watch the security footage, so I would know, so I would understand, that there was no escape, that the machine was larger than me, that my love was not enough. He looked up. "She was wrong," he said. "My love was enough, it just wasn't the right kind. It wasn't brave, it wasn't loud, it wasn't the love that fights, it was the love that hides, that waits, that hopes someone else will be strong enough." His eyes found mine again. "And you were," he said. "You found her, you fought, you burned it down. The ledger, Ethan, it's not just yours, it's mine, and I'm ready to pay." The defense attorney stood. Young, expensive, the kind of lawyer who believed that enough money could polish any turd into a diamond. "Mr. Whitfield," he said, "you claim you were manipulated, coerced, a victim of Clarissa Whitfield's schemes, and yet you married her, you gave her your company. You let her raise your son, Marcus, as her own. You let her destroy your first wife, ignore your second child, and build an empire of silence. How convenient that now, facing prison yourself, you recast yourself as a tragic hero. How convenient that your son, the furniture you ignored, has become your salvation, your get-out-of-jail-free card." He leaned forward. "It possible, Mr. Whitfield, that you are simply trading one manipulation for another? That you are now using Ethan's story, his pain, his suffering, his miraculous rescue of his mother, to save your own skin?" My father was silent. The silence stretched. 10 seconds. 20. The courtroom held its breath. Then my father smiled, not the smile of a man who had won. The smile of a man who had lost everything and discovered that losing was not the end. "Yes," he said. The defense attorney blinked. "Yes," my father repeated. "I am using him. I am using his story, his pain, his strength, because it is the only thing I have left, the only currency that matters, the only debt I can pay." He turned to look at my stepmother. Clarissa taught me that, he said. She taught me that love is weakness, that family is leverage, that every relationship is a transaction. I learned her lessons too well. I became her student, her partner, her puppet. He turned back to the attorney. Ethan, he said, he learned different lessons. He learned them in kitchens and bedrooms and the particular hell of being invisible. He learned them without teachers, without books, without anyone to show him the way, and he became something neither Clarissa nor I could imagine. Something the machine couldn't break, something that could wait, that could plan, that could balance a ledger 15 years long. He stood, the bailiff moved to stop him, but the judge raised a hand. He became, my father said, the thing we feared most, not a victim, not a villain. A witness, someone who saw everything, remembered everything, refused to forget. And now, he looked at me, he is making us remember too. Making us pay, making us face what we did, what we became, what we let the machine turn us into. He sat down, the courtroom was silent, then my mother stood, she walked to the front, past the gallery, past the reporters, past the bailiff who moved to intercept her, then stopped, confused by her white coat, her authority, her bearing. She stood before the witness box, she looked at my father. You gave me the key, she said. Her voice was rough, unused, but it carried. In 2011, you risked everything. You failed, but you tried, that matters. She turned to the court. Ethan, she said, he didn't just try, he succeeded. He found me, he found the records, he found the truth. Not because he was brave, not because he was strong, because he was patient, because he was invisible, because he learned, as we all learned, that the machine's greatest weakness is its arrogance, its belief that the people it erases stay erased. That the furniture doesn't dream, that the ghosts don't remember. She turned to me. Ethan, she said, stand up. I stood, the courtroom looked at me, the furniture, the servant, the boy who had died at 11:47 p.m. and been reborn with a ledger. Tell them, my mother said, tell them what the ledger is, not a weapon, not a list of debts, tell them what you told me. In the motel, the first night, I looked at her, at my father. At Marcus, sitting in the back row, his golden life in ruins, his real mother's file clutched in his hands. Ledger, I said, and my voice was small, 16, servant soft, but it carried in the silence like a bell. Is a promise that the invisible will be seen, that the erased will be remembered, that the machine, I paused, doesn't win, not because we destroy it, but because we survive it, because we outlast it, because we refuse to become what it wants us to become. I sat down. My mother returned to her seat, the prosecutor looked at the judge looked at the ceiling, and my stepmother, Clarissa Whitfield, architect of the machine, builder of cages, destroyer of mothers and sons, finally spoke. May I address the court, she said, her voice was different, not the honey, not the arsenic, something flatter, something that had lost its music. The judge nodded, she stood, her chains rattled, she didn't look at my father, didn't look at me, didn't look at my mother. She looked at Marcus, her golden boy, her creation, the son she had stolen, not made. Marcus, she said, come here. He didn't move. Marcus, she repeated. I am still your mother, in the eyes of the law, in the records, in the signature you gave me when you were 12, I am your mother, and I am asking you, not commanding, not demanding, asking you to come here. Marcus stood, he walked to the front of the courtroom, past me, past my mother. To the defense table where the woman who had raised him sat in orange, her perfect hair dull under fluorescent lights, her perfect mask shattered beyond repair. He stopped 3 feet away, close enough to touch, far enough to be untouchable. What do you want? He asked. Want you to understand, she said. The facility, phase 2, it was not cruelty, it was necessity. The world is full of inconvenient people, sick relatives, embarrassing secrets, loose ends. I provided a service. A solution. I gave families peace. I gave them control. I gave them silence, Marcus said. The word was quiet, final, the word of a boy who had spent his life being loud and was only now discovering the power of quiet. You gave them silence, he repeated. You gave them erasure. You gave them the lie that their problems could disappear if they paid enough, and you made me part of it. You made me sign. You made me believe that I was golden, that I was special, that I deserved everything I had. He reached into his pocket, pulled out the file, his real mother's file, Clarissa Vance, patient, prisoner, ghost. You told me my grandmother was there, he said. You told me she was sick. You made me sign a form for a woman who didn't exist. And all the while my real mother, he held up the file, was in phase 2, being erased, being stored, being silenced, so you could take her place, so you could become my mother, so you could use me. He dropped the file on the table. It landed between them like a verdict. Choose him, Marcus said. Clarissa blinked. Marcus turned, looked at me. The furniture, the servant, the ghost. I choose him. Over you, over gold, over the lie. He walked back to his seat. He didn't look at her again. The judge called a recess. The courtroom emptied slowly, then quickly, then in a rush of whispers and flashes, and the particular hunger of people who had witnessed something they didn't understand but knew was important. I stayed in my seat. My mother stayed beside me. My father was led away by bailiffs, his testimony complete, his debt unpaid, his future uncertain. Marcus sat in the back row alone, his file on his lap, his golden life reduced to paper and ink, and the particular clarity of a boy who had finally chosen. My stepmother sat at the defense table motionless, her chains rattling when she breathed, her eyes fixed on the file Marcus had left behind. I opened my notebook. I wrote, Entry 12, the trial. My father spoke, my mother stood, Marcus chose, and my stepmother for the first time was seen, not as a monster, not as a machine, as a woman who built a fortress and discovered too late that she had locked herself inside. I paused. Then the ledger grows, not with debts but with names. Elena Whitfield, Marcus Vance, even Clarissa, even my father, all of them prisoners, all of them learning too late, too slow, too broken that the only escape is to stop building cages. I closed the notebook. My mother touched my shoulder. Come, she said, we have a motel room and I want to hear about your first life, the one where you died, the one where you were reborn, the one where you became the ledger. I looked at her. You believe me? I asked. About dying, about remembering. About the clock at 11:47 p.m. She smiled, the smile from the photograph, the smile that had survived 15 years. I believe, she said, that you survived, however you did it, whatever you call it, you survived and you found me and that is enough. We walked out of the courtroom together into the afternoon sun, into a world that was not fixed, not healed, not free of machines, but a world where the ghosts were visible, where the furniture had names. Where the ledger was not just a record of debts, but a map toward something else, something that might eventually become peace. The motel room had 2 beds, a flickering TV, and a window that looked out at a parking lot where a single street lamp buzzed and died and buzzed again. My mother sat on the bed nearest the door, her back against the headboard, her knees drawn up, her scarred arms wrapped around her legs. She looked small, smaller than she had in the courtroom. White coat was gone, replaced by a sweatshirt I'd bought from a thrift store 3 blocks away. Without the costume of authority, she was just a woman who had spent 15 years in a room with no windows. I sat on the other bed. Notebook open, pen ready. Tell me, I said. She didn't look at me. She looked at the window, the street lamp, the parking lot empty except for a single car that had been there since we arrived. Phase 1 was a hospital, she said. Real doctors, real treatments. The kind of place where wealthy families sent relatives with embarrassing conditions, addiction, mental illness, pregnancy, conditions that couldn't be hidden but could be controlled. Clarissa worked there as a fundraiser. She saw the potential, the demand, the money. She reached for the water bottle on the nightstand. Her hand shook. She drank, set it down, wiped her mouth with the back of her wrist. Phase 2 was her innovation, not a hospital, a warehouse. No windows because windows mean witnesses. No doctors because doctors ask questions. Just orderlies, guards, people who understood that their paycheck depended on silence, and patients who weren't patients anymore, who were inventory, assets, problems that had been paid to disappear. She looked at me. I was there for the transition. 2008 to 2011. Phase 1 was closing, Phase 2 opening. The move happened at night, trucks, restraints, the kind of logistics that Clarissa excelled at. She was proud of it. She showed me the plans, the expansion charts, the projections. Projections, growth models. My mother's voice was flat. She wasn't satisfied with one facility. She wanted 10, 20, a network. She called it the architecture. A franchise of erasure. Every city with wealthy families needed a place to store their inconvenient truths, and she would provide it. She stood, walked to the window, pressed her forehead against the glass, cold from the night outside. She had partners, she said. Investors. People who understood that silence was a commodity. That grief could be managed. That families would pay anything, anything to avoid scandal, to avoid truth, to avoid looking at the people they had broken and admitting they were the ones who had broken them. She turned. They as someone above her, Ethan. Someone who funded the expansion, who designed the business model, who recruited the investors and managed the legal protections and made sure that no matter what happened, no matter how many patients, how many families, how many signatures, the machine would keep running. Mother shook her head. I don't know. Clarissa called them the architect. Never a name, never a face, just phone calls, encrypted emails, wire transfers from shell companies. The architect designed the system. Clarissa managed it. And people like me, she touched her shaved head, her scarred arms, we were the product. She walked back to the bed, sat down. Her movements were careful, precise, the movements of someone who had learned that sudden gestures were punished, that visibility was dangerous, that even in freedom, the habits of imprisonment died slowly. Architect knows about you, she said. I stopped writing. The machine has sensors, because every facility reports. Because your stepmother, Clarissa, she wasn't just arrested. She was disconnected, cut off. The architect knows when pieces go missing, when ledgers stop balancing, when ghosts refuse to stay buried. She reached out, touched my notebook. The cover, worn from carrying, from hiding, from being pressed against my chest in moments of fear. They know about this, she said. They know about your entries, your plans, your patience. They know because Clarissa told them, because she was required to report. Because the machine doesn't just swallow people, it learns from them. It adapts, it evolves. I looked at my notebook, the ledger, my weapon, my promise, my map. Coming, my mother said. Who? Cleaners, that's what Clarissa called them. People who fix problems, who remove obstacles, who make sure that the architecture remains intact. She paused. They'll come for me first. I'm the witness, the proof, the one who can connect Clarissa to the architect. Then they'll come for you. Because you're the one who found me, who exposed the system, who proved that ghosts can fight back. She took my hand, her grip was hard, Harder than it should have been for someone so thin, so scarred, so broken by years of chemical compliance and physical restraint. We need to run, she said. I pulled my hand away, not roughly, just enough. No, I said. Ethan, no. I stood. I walked to the window. I looked at the empty parking lot, the buzzing street lamp, the car that had been sitting there too long. I've been running my whole life, from Marcus, from Clarissa, from the knife at 11:47 p.m. I died running. I was reborn running. I'm done. I turned. I have the key, the address, the records from the facility. I have Marcus. I have Mrs. Patterson. I have a father who is finally talking and a mother who is finally free. I paused. I have a ledger, and I'm going to use it. How I sat back down, I opened the notebook to a fresh page. I wrote, entry 13, the architect, unknown, powerful, connected, coming. Then I looked at my mother. We find them, I said. Not by running, by walking in, by using the system against itself, by becoming the kind of problem that the machine can't solve, the kind of ghost that won't stay buried, the kind of witness that multiplies faster than they can silence. I tapped the pen against the paper. Marcus has a signature, I said. On a form he signed when he was 12. A form for a grandmother who didn't exist. A form that connects him to the facility. To Clarissa, to the machine. My mother nodded slowly. And your father, she said. He has records, financial, the wire transfers, the shell companies, the payments that funded the architecture. You, I said, you have the patient records, the names, the dates, the proof that hundreds of people were erased, that families paid for silence. That the machine has been running for 15 years. I wrote again, the ledger is not a weapon, it's an invitation, to every family who paid, to every patient who survived, to every person who signed a form they didn't read and wondered years later what had really happened to their inconvenient relative. Looked up, we publish it, I said. All of it, not to the police are part of the system, paid by the machine, protected by the architecture. Not to the newspapers are owned by the same investors who fund the facilities. We publish it to the families, to the signers, to the people who thought they were buying silence and discovered too late that they were buying complicity. My mother was quiet then. They'll kill us. Probably. You're 16. I'm 26, I said. I died at 26. I was reborn at 16. I'm whatever age I need to be to finish this. She smiled, small, tired. The smile of a woman who had spent 15 years performing cooperation and was only now learning how to perform defiance. Your father, she said. He used to say that, whatever age I need to be. Before the drinking, before the absence, before Clarissa turned him into a puppet. She paused. He was brave once. I think you got that from him. The bravery and the patience and the terrible, stubborn refusal to let go. She stood. She walked to her bag, a plastic grocery bag, all she had in the world, and pulled out a phone. Cheap, prepaid, the kind that couldn't be traced. I kept this, she said. In the facility, hidden for years. I used it once to call a journalist, I thought if the story got out, the machine would stop. The journalist disappeared, not dead, just gone, transferred to a different city. A different job, a different life. The machine doesn't just erase patients. Raises anyone who threatens exposure. She set the phone on the bed between us. But before he disappeared, she said, he gave me a name. Someone who had been trying to find the architect for years. Someone who had lost family to the machine. Someone who understood that the only way to fight silence was with noise. She looked at me. Her name is Sue Jin. She runs a website, obscure, encrypted, dedicated to tracking missing persons who were never reported missing. The disappeared, the erased. The ones the machine swallowed. I picked up the phone, turned it over. Where is she? Seoul, my mother said, but she moves. She has to. The machine has tried to find her, to silence her, to add her to the inventory. She's still alive because she's careful, because she's patient, because my mother smiled. She keeps a ledger of her own. I wrote in my notebook, entry 14, Sue Jin, Seoul, ledger keeper, target of the machine, potential ally. I closed the book. I looked at the window, the parking lot. The car that had been sitting too long. Then we go to Seoul, I said. My mother shook her head. We meet. I know the system, I know the codes, I know how to move without being seen. She touched my face. Her palm was rough, warm, alive. You stay here, you finish the trial, you protect Marcus, you keep the ledger growing. And when I find Sujin, when I build the network, when we have enough voices to drown out the machine, then you come. I opened my mouth to argue. She pressed her finger to my lips, the first touch of a mother to her son in 8 years, not a gesture of control, of love. Lost you once, she said, to cancer that wasn't cancer, to a funeral I didn't attend, to a life of servitude I couldn't save you from. I won't lose you again, not to the architect, not to the cleaners, not to the machine. She picked up her bag, she walked to the door, she paused. Car in the parking lot, she said, not turning around. It arrived 20 minutes ago. 2 men, suits, the kind that don't wrinkle because they don't sit down. They're waiting for something, for confirmation, for orders, for the signal that it's time to clean. She looked back, be here when they get it. She opened the door, the night air rushed in, cold and sharp and smelling of rain. Mom, I said. She stopped. See you again. A question, a promise. She smiled, the smile from the photograph. I know, she said, and she was gone. I waited 5 minutes. I packed my notebook, my pen. The prepaid phone my mother had left behind. I walked to the bathroom. I flushed the toilet. I ran the sink. Through the thin walls I heard movement in the parking lot. Car doors, footsteps, the particular silence of men who had been trained to be quiet. I opened the bathroom window small, narrow, designed to prevent entry, not exit. I squeezed through, dropped into the bushes, ran 3 blocks away. I stopped, bent over, hands on knees, breathing hard. The motel was behind me. The men in suits were behind me. My mother was ahead, somewhere in the night. Moving towards Seoul and Sujin and the network of ledger keepers who refused to let the machine win. I straightened, I looked at the phone in my hand, I turned it on, one contact. Saved under M, I pressed call, it rang once. Ethan, my mother's voice, distant, compressed, already on a bus, a train, a path I couldn't follow. They came, I said. I know, keep moving, don't go home, don't go to Marcus, don't go anywhere the machine expects. Then, silence then, the cottage, the keeper of ashes. She has a car, supplies, a route that doesn't appear on maps. A pause, and Ethan, yes, the ledger, don't stop writing, even when you're running, even when you're scared, especially then. The machine wants you silent, it wants you invisible, it wants you to disappear into fear and never resurface. Her voice grew softer. Give it what it wants. The line went dead. I looked at the phone. I looked at the street around me, empty, dark, indifferent to the boy standing in a pool of streetlight with a notebook in his pocket and a dead woman's promise in his chest. I started walking, not running, walking. The pace of someone who had learned that survival was not about speed but about direction, toward the cottage, toward the keeper of ashes, toward whatever came next. I reached the cottage at dawn. The garden was wet with dew. The cat was on the railing, both ears intact, watching me approach with the particular disinterest of creatures who had seen too much to be surprised by anything. The door opened before I knocked. The woman, my mother's friend, the keeper, looked at me. She didn't ask about my mother. She didn't ask about the men in suits. She just stepped aside and said, "You're late." I entered. The kitchen was different. The photographs were gone. The shelves were empty. In their place were boxes, bags. Particular clutter of someone preparing to leave. Running too, I said. Machine has a long memory, she said. And I'm on the list, have been for years. Your mother's escape bought me time. Her testimony bought me more, but time runs out. She handed me a set of keys. Car in the back, old, reliable, tank is full. Trunk has food, water, cash, not much, enough. Where do I go? South. There's a town, no name worth remembering. A man there, he calls himself the librarian. He collects stories like yours, ledgers, testimonies, evidence that the machine couldn't swallow. She paused. He'll know about Sujin, he'll know how to reach her, how to reach your mother. I took the keys. Why are you helping us? I asked. She smiled, small, sad, the smile of someone who had buried too much to be surprised by anything. Because your mother saved my sister, she said. 1987, college, your mother was pre-med. My sister was bleeding out in a dorm bathroom after a back alley procedure. Your mother found her, saved her, kept her secret, kept her alive. She touched my face, the same gesture as my mother, the same rough palm, the same warmth. Your mother collects debts, Ethan, not to collect them, to forgive them, to turn them into something else, into grace, into possibility, into the stubborn, beautiful refusal to let the machine win. She walked to the door, opened it. She said, "The cleaners are thorough, but they're slow. They check the obvious places first. Motels, bus stations, airports. They don't think to look in gardens, in cottages, in the spaces between the spaces." I walked out, paused at the gate. "What's your name?" I asked. She smiled again. "Keeper of Ashes doesn't have a name," she said. "Just a function, just a purpose, just the stubborn, beautiful refusal to let the fire die completely." She closed the door. I heard the lock turn. I walked to the car. It started on the 3rd try. I drove south. The sun rose behind me. The road was empty, flat, stretching toward a horizon that didn't promise anything except more road. I opened my notebook at a stoplight in a town too small to have a name. I wrote, "Entry 15, alone, moving. The machine is close. The architect is closer. My mother is ahead, finding Sujin. I am behind, finding the librarian. Marcus is in the courtroom, holding the file of his real mother. My father is in a cell, paying debts he didn't know he owed." I paused. The light turned green. I didn't move. I wrote, "I don't know if I'll survive this. I don't know if any of us will. The machine is larger than I knew. The architect is smarter than I feared. And I am 16 years old, driving a stolen car toward a town that doesn't exist, carrying a notebook and a dead woman's promise." Another pause then, "But I am also 26. I have died. I have been reborn. I have scrubbed floors and cooked meals and died with a knife in my chest and a clock on the wall. I have learned that the machine's greatest weakness is not strength, not violence, not even truth." I looked at the road ahead, empty, waiting. Its greatest weakness is patience. The patience of furniture, the patience of ghosts, the patience of a boy who died at 11:47 p.m. and woke up with a ledger and nothing but time. I closed the notebook. I drove. The sun climbed higher. The road stretched on. And somewhere behind me, in a courtroom, in a cell, in a cottage with a cat on the railing, the machine was calculating. Adapting, preparing its next move. But I was calculating too, adapting, preparing, because the ledger was not closed, the game was not over, and the ghost was still writing. The room smelled of paper and dust and something else, something that reminded me of my mother's cottage, of lavender and old books and the particular weight of memory pressed between pages. The shelves stretched upward into darkness, beyond the reach of the single bulb that hung from the ceiling, swaying slightly in a draft I couldn't feel. I I stood in the doorway, notebook in my jacket, keys in my pocket, staring at the man with white eyes who claimed to have been waiting for me. Close the door, he said. I didn't move. Afraid, he said. Not a question, a diagnosis. Good, fear is information. Fear tells you what matters, what you're willing to lose. He turned his head, tracking my position with a precision that shouldn't have been possible. Close the door, Ethan. The cleaners passed through this town 3 hours ago. They're circling back. They won't check the bar twice. They think they've already cleared it. But if they see light under this door, if they hear voices, he smiled. Close it. I closed it. The sound was final, the click of a lock engaging or my imagination supplying one. There was no chair, just the floor, wooden, worn smooth by decades of feet. I sat cross-legged, facing the desk. The master ledger lay between us, leather-bound, thick as a brick. I could see pages protruding from the edges, some yellowed with age, some fresh and white, some stained with colors I didn't want to identify. Architect, the librarian said. He opened the master ledger, flipping through pages with fingers that moved too fast for eyes like his. Not a name, a title, passed down, inherited, bought. The first architect designed Phase 1 in 1987. A private hospital in Switzerland, discreet, legal, barely. Their child died there, overdose, covered up, the family grateful. They saw the potential, the need, the market. He stopped at a page near the middle, tapped it. Second architect expanded. 1994, Eastern Europe, facilities in 4 countries. The fall of the Soviet Union created opportunities, wealth without accountability. Families who had spent generations learning to disappear people, now with money and global connections. Another page, third architect. 2003, the franchise model, your stepmother's innovation but not her invention. She bought in, paid for the territory, managed the local architecture, reported upward, took her percentage. He looked at me with those white eyes. She was good, Ethan, efficient, ruthless, the kind of manager who exceeded projections, who expanded the inventory, who turned a regional operation into a national one. The current architect, the librarian, closed the master ledger. Unknown, he said. The transition happened 6 months ago. The third architect, Clarissa's predecessor, died. Natural causes, supposedly, heart attack, but the timing, he shrugged. Convenient. The new architect appeared immediately. No gap in operations, no disruption to cash flow, just a new voice on encrypted calls, a new signature on wire transfers. A new philosophy. Previous architects were businessmen, profit-driven, expansion-oriented. The new one, he paused, tilted his head. Different, more ideological. The machine isn't just a business anymore, it's a mission, a crusade. The new architect believes that some people deserve to be erased, not because they're inconvenient, because they're wrong, flawed, damaged, better removed than repaired. He leaned forward. Your mother was one of the first under the new regime. 2008, the diagnosis was real, the cancer. But the treatment was designed to fail. Slowly, expensively, painfully, to make her suffer, to make your father suffer, to turn a family into a laboratory for the architect's theories. I felt something cold in my chest, not rage, something older, something that had been waiting since I was 8 years old, since the funeral I didn't attend, since the stepmother appeared with her perfect smile and her machine for erasing mothers. Why her? The librarian opened the master ledger again. Found a page near the back, held it up, a photograph, my mother, young, maybe 20, standing in front of a building I didn't recognize, not a hospital, not a facility, a university. She was smiling. Not the careful smile from the cottage, the performative smile from the facility, a real smile, free, unburdened. Behind her, partially visible in the frame, stood another woman. Dark hair, sharp features, eyes that even in a faded photograph seemed to cut through the lens. Elena Whitfield, the librarian said, tapping my mother's image. Pre-med, top of her class, full scholarship. He moved his finger to the other woman. And this, his voice changed, became softer, almost reverent. This is the architect, or who the architect was before. I stared at the photograph, the woman behind my mother, the eyes. I'd seen them before, not in person, not in memory, but in the mirror, in my own face. In the particular shape of my cheekbones, the angle of my jaw, the way I held my head when I was thinking. She's your mother's sister, the librarian said. Your aunt, Evelyn Vance, born 3 years after your mother, different father, different life, but the same eyes, the same intelligence, the same stubbornness. He set the photograph down. They were close once, college roommates, best friends. Then something happened. 1987, the overdose I mentioned, the first architect's child. It was Evelyn's child too. She was pregnant. She hid it. She gave birth in secret. She gave the baby to the system, to the machine, to the father who would build an empire on its silence. He paused. Your mother found out. She tried to stop it. She tried to save the baby. She failed. The baby disappeared. The father died. Evelyn was changed. She blamed your mother for knowing, for trying, for not trying hard enough, for surviving when her child didn't. I looked at the photograph again. My mother smiling, unaware, my aunt standing behind her, already gone. Evelyn became the architect, the librarian said. Not immediately. She spent years learning, climbing, proving herself to the machine she would eventually inherit, but she never forgot, never forgave. And when she finally took control 6 months ago, she began with your mother. The cancer, the facility, the erasure, not because Elena was inconvenient, because she was personal. He closed the master ledger. Your stepmother, Clarissa, she was Evelyn's tool, her instrument, her way of reaching into your family without exposing herself. She managed the facility. She managed your father. She managed you, all while Evelyn watched from a distance. Guided, approved, waited for the moment when your mother would finally break, when your father would finally collapse, when you would finally disappear. He leaned back. But you didn't disappear, he said. You died, you were reborn, you became the ledger. And now Evelyn, the architect, knows about you, not as a victim, as a threat. The first real threat the machine has faced in 30 years. I sat in silence, the bulbs swayed, the shelves breathed, the thousands of notebooks watched, patient, waiting. What do? I asked. The librarian smiled. You finish it, he said. The ledger, the story, the war. You find Evelyn, you confront her, you make her see what she's become, what the machine has turned her into. You make her understand that the child she lost, the child she blames your mother for, is not coming back, that the machine doesn't resurrect the dead, it just creates more ghosts. He pushed the master ledger toward me. Take it, he said. It's yours now, every name, every facility, every signature, the complete architecture. Use it, publish it, burn it, whatever you need to do to finish this. I didn't touch it. Why me? I asked. Why not you? You've been collecting this for decades. You know more than I do. You have resources, connections, the network of ledger keepers. Librarian's smile faded. Because I am old, he said. Because I am blind. Because I spent my life watching and recording and never acting. I am the keeper of stories, Ethan, not the hero of them. He touched his white eyes. These are not cataracts, they're scars. From a time when I tried to be what you are, when I tried to fight, I failed. The machine took my sight, my family, my name. It left me alive because a blind man is no threat. A blind man can only watch, only remember, only wait for someone younger, someone braver, someone who has already died and discovered that death is not the end. He stood slowly, painfully, the movements of a body that had been broken and healed wrong. Your mother is in Seoul, he said. She found Sujin. They're building the network, gathering the families, the signers, the ones who paid for silence and are ready to speak. But they need the master ledger, they need the proof, they need the names. He walked to a shelf, pulled down a small box, wooden, carved with the same pattern as my mother's, intertwined initials, E and M. Your mother left this, he said, before she went to the facility, before she knew what was coming. She gave it to me for safekeeping, said that someday someone would come, someone who needed to know the truth, someone who could finish what she started. He handed me the box. I opened it. Inside was a key, not brass, not like the facility key. Silver, old, tarnished, and a note in my mother's handwriting, the same handwriting from the photograph, from the cottage, from the message that had led me here. For Evelyn, the room she doesn't know I know about, the room where she keeps what she lost. The only thing that can stop the machine. Find it, Ethan, find the room, find the child, and give Evelyn back what the machine took. I looked up. The librarian was gone. The door was open. The bar beyond was silent, empty, the scarred bartender mopping the same spot with the same rag, not looking up as I emerged. I walked out into the night. The car was where I'd left it. The tank was still full. The trunk still held food, water, cash. I sat in the driver's seat. I looked at the key, silver, old, tarnished, a key to a room I didn't know, a room where the architect kept what she lost, the child. I started the car. I drove, not toward Seoul, not yet. Toward the last address in the master ledger. The address marked architect, the address where my aunt waited, where the machine had its heart. Where the only thing that could stop it was the thing it had spent 30 years trying to bury. The facility was different from 247 Westbrook Lane, larger, older, hidden in plain sight, a converted estate on a hill, surrounded by trees, with a view of the city below that suggested not imprisonment but privilege. The kind of place where wealthy families sent their children for treatment. Where the architecture was beautiful and the bars were invisible. I parked a mile away, walked through the woods, found a door marked service. The silver key fit, the lock turned silently. I entered. The room was at the top of the house, small, attic, dusty, filled with the debris of a life that had been abandoned, toys, clothes, a crib with faded paint and photographs, hundreds of them, a child, growing, changing. From infant to toddler to young child, the same face in everyone, dark hair, sharp features, eyes that cut through the lens, eyes like mine. I picked up the last photograph. The child was maybe 5, standing in front of a window, smiling, not the careful smile of performance, a real smile, free. The date on the back, 1992, 5 years after the overdose. 5 years after the disappearance. 5 years after Evelyn had given her child to the machine and become its architect. The child had lived, had grown, had been hidden, not erased, preserved. I heard footsteps behind me. I turned. Evelyn stood in the doorway, my aunt, the architect, older than the photograph from my mother's college days, grey at the temples, lines around the eyes that weren't from smiling. She wore a suit that cost more than the cottage, more than the motel, more than everything my mother had owned in 15 years of imprisonment. She looked at me, at my face, at her own eyes staring back at her. Ethan, she said. Not surprised, not angry, resigned, the voice of someone who had been waiting for this moment, who had planned for it, who had built the machine knowing that someday someone would come to destroy it. You found the room, she said. I found everything. She stepped inside, closed the door. Sat on the floor among the toys and photographs and the dust of a life that had never been lived. She was beautiful, Evelyn said, not looking at me, looking at the photograph in my hand. Isabel, that was her name. I named her after my grandmother, the only person who ever loved me without wanting something. She reached out, touched the photograph. Her finger traced the child's smile. I gave her to the machine because I thought it would save her. Because I was young and scared, and the father, the first architect, he promised. He said she would be safe, hidden, protected, that someday when the world was ready I could claim her. She laughed, broken, bitter, but the machine doesn't give back what it takes, it just keeps taking. I searched for years, decades. I built the architecture, expanded it, made it stronger, thinking that if I was powerful enough, if I was indispensable enough, they would tell me where she was, they would give her back. She looked at me. They didn't, they lied, they moved her, they told me she died. 1995, pneumonia, a small funeral I wasn't invited to because I was too emotional, because I might draw attention. She stood, walked to the window, looked out at the city below. So I became.